Chapter 251. 3 days too, there were traces of it. Those words made Cal not want to waste any more time. It was just 3 days. It was a long yet short amount of time. I will listen to the explanation on the way. Sure. Cal wrapped Rayon back up in the bundle of blankets and held him in his arms. Since Iruhaben was there, they could immediately teleport to the eastern continent. Iruhaben looked toward the entrance and started to speak at that moment. The Crown Prince is here. Cal soon heard someone rustling outside the tent. Now that he thought about it, although Choi Han and the others had a decent idea about Cal's situation, Crown Prince Alberu will find it odd that he suddenly did not go with them. "Can I come in?" he could hear Alberu's voice outside the tent. Cal, who was holding Rayon, looked toward Iruhaben, who went to the entrance and opened the flap. Alberu flinched after seeing Iruhaben. It was the knight with white gold hair that had come as Cal's guard when the 4 kingdoms and the One Beast People tribe had first solidified their alliance. He could not help but flinch as he had not heard that this person had arrived. He heard Cal's voice from inside the tent at that moment and turned away from Iruhaben. "Your Highness, I hope that only you come in." That was the plan. Alberu was already walking into the tent alone. He knew secrecy was important if it was urgent enough for Cal to change his plans. "What is going on?" Alberu got right down to business. Cal preferred it this way as well. "I guess it is about time I told him." Cal briskly walked up to Alberu. "What are you doing?" Alberu flinched after seeing the emotionless Cal briskly walking through the dark tent while being covered in blood. However, Cal's next action made him completely shocked. "Huh?" Alberu had none of his usual majesticness as he made that noise. His pupils were shaking as well. He could see the face of the creature poking out of the blanket bundle. The round and chubby face was quite cute, even with its eyes closed. However, that was not the issue. Alberu made eye contact with Cal when a calm voice started to speak from behind him. "It is a dragon. He is currently going through his first growth phase. Huh, he is 6 years old. His name is Rayon Meru. It is a great name that I made for him." Huh. However, Cal was not finished speaking just yet. He carried Rayon with one hand while pointing toward Iruhaben with the other hand. "This senior is an ancient dragon. He is the eldest dragon on the western continent." Alberu's eyes blinked a couple of times in shock. He then lightly shook his head. "Am I tired? Did I not sleep well for the past few days?" Crown Prince Alberu had been hearing about the battle while settling the formations of troops. He thought that one of Cal's people would be best to hear the story from, and thus called over the freest person from Cal's group. That freest person was none other than Hilsman, the vice-captain of the Hennetus Territories Knights Brigade. Alberu could not help but wonder why he was tired after hearing about the battle from Hilsman. The young Master Nim used his silver shield. He then also exploded the dragon's rage in order to create a wall of fire. Then he created this wall of water which allowed the whales to go berserk. The shield broke after that. I thought that we were in serious trouble, and that the young master would faint. However, at that moment, the young Master Nim used an ancient power that he had been hiding. After the shield and the water, he shot hundreds of stone spears into the air. He had heard about what Choi Han and the others had done as well. However, Alberu could not help but question his ears after hearing that Cal used the shield, water, and then the stone spears. "That is why I realized that the shield does not break in the end. That is all, Your Highness." Hilsman seemed extremely excited as he had veins visible on his neck from shouting. Normally, Alberu would have questioned such a recap. However, seeing the sniffling knight captain from the 1st Knights Brigade and the temporary captain of the Mage Brigade nodding their head, he could not say anything about it. But a dragon, and not just one, but 2. Alberu turned toward the ancient dragon. The ancient dragon shrugged his shoulders with a stoic expression. "Nice to meet you." The ancient dragon was speaking as if Alberu was beneath him. He had thought that this man was a guard knight, but he was a dragon. Alberu could not believe it. However, Cal continued to speak. He still had a lot of things left to say. And I may explode to death in 3 days if things go wrong." "What? You crazy? Oh." Iruhaben let out an "oh" as if he did not expect such a response from Alberu, who stopped speaking and brushed his face with both hands. Cal continued to speak with a calm expression. There is an issue with my ancient powers. It is being handled with a temporary measure right now, however. It seems that I only have 3 days left. Alberu was at a loss for words after seeing how calm Cal was right now. He didn't seem to be lying, and even then he knew that Cal would not be the type to lie about something like this. And if he thought about it, there was a good chance what Cal was saying was true. The young Master Nim was coughing up so much blood that I was worried that something bad might happen. However, he controlled the battlefield with a calm demeanor afterward. Vice Captain Hilsman's voice echoed in Alberu's mind. He knew that Cal always got injured or needed to recuperate after using his ancient powers. Such a person used 3 ancient powers that he had been saving for an emergency. Would his body be fine after all of that? That is why it looks like I will need to act on my own for the next 3 days. This stupid idiot. Alberu wanted to swear at Cal, but held himself back. He felt that Cal and he were similar people from time to time. They would use sly schemes from time to time in order to profit. At the same time, they acted differently when their goal was for the greater good. The greater good. Crown Prince Alberu was someone who walked with the weight of the greater good on his shoulder. He finally started to speak after a long time. You have a 3-day break. Make sure that you return after that. He wanted to give Cal a longer break, however. He needed to say that Cal must return. I understand. I will listen to you since it is an order from the son of the Roan Kingdom, Your Highness. I will come after the war to strip myself of the commander title. I will receive a lot of reward money, but please do not think about giving me a medal. You always have something to say. How can such a punk be the famed young Master Silver Shield? I hate that title as well. Seeing Cal honestly seem to hate that title made Alberu ignore Cal, Rayon, and Eruhaben as he headed out of the tent. He decided feigning ignorance about the two of them was the best course of action. Plop. The entrance flap was opened and then closed again. Cal turned away from the closed entrance as he headed toward Eruhaben, who had created a teleportation magic circle on the ground in the tent. The magic circle underneath Eruhaben's feet were shining brightly. Eruhaben activated the magic circle as soon as Cal stepped on top of it. Uwuang Cal closed his eyes as his surroundings blurred. He felt his body teleport before hearing the ancient dragon's voice. We will teleport to that dragon, to Olian's lair. The former oldest dragon in the eastern continent. Cal had teleported to his lair. He could see the mess of a lair the moment he opened his eyes. The lair that probably once had a lot of beautiful sculptures was full of dust and was also destroyed in multiple places. Nobody would think that this used to be a dragon's lair. However, Cal could tell that it was a dragon's lair as soon as he got there. Eruhaben's bitter voice could be heard. This is what happens to a dragon that does not die a natural death. A dragon that did not die a natural death. Whether it is from suicide or murder, a dragon who dies without living out its full lifespan looks different from dragons that live for their full 1,000 years. Cal could see the rotting dragon corpse from on the side. A dragon who finishes its 1,000 years of life would shine brightly and turn into dust as they become part of the earth. However, just like the dragon's skeleton in the black swamp in the forest of darkness, a dragon that does not live out its entire life starts to rot, just like any other life form. It rots into the ground extremely slowly. The rotting usually finishes within 100 years, but this guy, Eruhaben, stopped to sigh before continuing to speak. It ended up being delayed for this guy because he died in his lair. He was in a really good area, so his rotting speed was slowed. That is why he looks like this right now. Cal could not say anything. He could tell why Eruhaben had been angry. A portion of the dead dragon's body was dug into with the heart at the center. It was fitting to say that someone had eaten him. Well, someone had taken a few bites out of him, as the heart and the surrounding flesh were gone. Olian was a green dragon. He was a complete asshole who always talked back to you, but he was still a decent guy, just like the little kid. Eruhaben did not share any more of his past memories as he started to walk. Follow me. I will show you the traces of the water. His lips twitched for a bit before he added on. I will take care of him once the truth is revealed and I figure out all of the necessary information. I will return him to nature. Definitely. Iruhaben could see Cal walking next to him. Let us move quickly then. He laughed after seeing Cal, who was more action than words, walking in front of him. Iruhaben stepped back in front of Cal, who did not know where they were going, and guided him to a secret area. Cal looked around while looking at the large lair that was giving off a majestic aura, even though it was destroyed and covered in dust. A secret area in a dragon's lair. Where could that be? He really was curious. He was also curious about the hint about the water ancient power, the hallway, office, study, and bedroom. Cal flinched once they walked past every room. It's in the restroom, the tub to be specific. He really liked taking half baths. I see. The dragon's secret area was in the restroom. Iruhaben put his hand on the tub as Cal looked around with a shocked expression. It was at that moment. Are you trying to sacrifice yourself? What? The super rock started to speak. Are we eating again? The glutton priestess started to speak as well. Why are the two of them being like this? Cal frowned after seeing a bright light as his mind was becoming complicated. Wuong white gold mana was coming out of Iruhaben's hand. The tub shined and let out a green magic circle once the mana touched the tub. That magic circle then covered the entire restroom. Cal let out a gasp at that moment. Wow! A forest had appeared. The average-looking restroom inside the cave had turned into a forest. Olian's attribute was wood. He had created a forest in his area. A tree had appeared where the tub used to be. It was a large tree with a round ditch dug underneath it. Inside the ditch was a diary. The diary was covered in regular leather, however. There were some small pieces of parchment on the inside as well. Iruhaben picked up the diary. The most important treasure to a dragon is its records. The record that it existed in this world. That is why the first thing they put in their secret areas are their records. He felt as if he said something useless to Rayon and Cal as he quickly opened up the diary. He stopped on a page with a parchment paper being used as a bookmark. This is the only page in the diary that talks about the Western continent instead of the Eastern continent. The only page with information about the Western continent. Iruhaben picked up the piece of parchment paper on that page. It is an old parchment paper that has had magic cast on it in order to let it last a long time. It seems to have been left behind a long time ago. I think it is possible that this is the Traceham. Why do you have such an expression on your face? Cal's expression seemed like a mix of laughter and frown. He could see the words written on top of the parchment. He had seen something similar before. He recalled the wooden plaque that he received from the elf priestess in the elf village with the world tree regarding the water of judgment. It also had the words, letter of resignation, written on it. However, the contents were a bit different. This was what was written on the wooden plaque. The tone made Cal certain that this ancient power was not normal as well. However, something different was written on this one. The words that were getting more intense made Cal's mind devolve into a complicated mess. The dry lake in the Perun kingdom. It was said that they had pushed away the child that the god who was making the lake favored, thus making the angry god take away the water. The ones to push that child away were the members of the Seka household with the white snake as their house crest. Perhaps. Was the child that the god favored the owner of the ancient power? Cal read the final statement on the parchment. The fiery thunderbolt cheapskate. The fire of destruction. He recalled one of the things that the owner of the ancient power that liked money had done. He had heard the story when he went to visit the World Tree about how the fire of destruction had covered the entire north with fire, making the World Tree sense danger to its life. He suddenly had a question. Who put out that fire? Cal was thinking that the person who put out that fire may have been the owner of this water of judgment. It's written in the diary where he found the parchment. I think the ancient power may be at that location. Cal's gaze headed toward the diary. The super rock started to speak into Cal's mind at that moment. The glutton, the cheapskate, the thief, the crybaby. And now the indestructible shield, the fire of destruction, the sound of the wind, and the vitality of the heart. He was listing the names of the owners of the ancient powers. This time the crazy kid, What kid are you trying to sacrifice yourself? Cal was at a loss for words after hearing the super rock seriously sounding concerned. 1. Half baths are a thing where you sit and only dunk half your body. Maybe it is just a Korean thing, chapter 252. 3 days 3. He had never cared about nicknames such as glutton or cheapskate for the ancient powers. He had felt that they were fitting names for them and that they weren't harming him in any way. However, this time he felt a bit different. Crazy kid, what kind of crazy are we talking about? The super rock started to speak as if it knew the question on Cal's mind. He was crazy for fights. I've never seen anybody so obsessed with fighting in my life. Cal started to frown. What is it? Is your body in pain? It's nothing, sir. Cal barely managed to respond to Audiobook before slowly resolving the complicated mess in his head. The world tree had told him to find the water of judgment. Furthermore, he thought about the ancient book he received from the elf chief that told the legend of the super rock. The book that described the super rock's journey had said some things about his friends, the one who had freed the North from the freezing cold. The hero mentioned in that story was definitely the money-crazed fire of destruction. The world tree that was scared by that fire had the elf priestess give Cal a bag of money when he went to see it, even though a long time had passed since the fire of destruction had last visited. The question was, who put out that fire? He naturally thought about the water of judgment. Furthermore, he thought about the divine item watering can that he had found in Guardian Knight Clope Seca's house. Rayon had read the words written on that watering can. Life ends with nothing. The water will eventually overflow, even if you build a dam. I had created a river for the frozen land, but all of you blocked it from flowing. There is only one conclusion for all of you who chased away my precious child in order to fill your greed. The child treasured by a god. The Perun kingdom and the Guardian Knight household had chased him away. That god then took away the river that he had made for them as punishment. This could also be the water of judgment. No, he was almost certain this was the case. He had another question once his thoughts reached this point. I thought the god treasured this child, but he is crazy about fighting. Doesn't something about that sound odd? It would make sense if the god of war treasured him. But there was no way that it was like that. Would a god of war be generous enough to create a lake that does not freeze for the people of the North who suffered every winter from the lake's freezing? If the god of war cared for people, he would not allow there to be wars. Why are you suddenly talking about the god of war? Are you really okay? Is something wrong? The ancient dragon started to worry after seeing Cal, who only had 3 days to live, suddenly start to frown and mumble to himself. However, he just looked away after seeing that Cal seemed to not have heard him and just continued to mumble to himself. Cal subconsciously let out a sigh. What the? The super rock was blabbing on in Cal's mind. The person who always just said, "Are you going to sacrifice yourself?" Had a lot to say this time, maybe because something he knew about came up. You're right. The god of war treasured that child. He was different from when he was young. If he did not find tasks associated with power to be annoying, then he could have become the ruler of the entire continent. He would also have become a tyrant who would have never been matched. I'm about to go crazy. He was not just at Tunka's level of being crazy for fights. He was a tyrant and was at the level of an emperor. Life sure is hard. Are you really okay? Cal ignored Audiobook's response as he placed Rayon on top of some soft grass for a moment before picking up the diary in the ancient dragon's hand. He then casually added on, by the way, Audiobook Nim. What is it? The dragon half-blood had black hair and black eyes once the dye magic was removed. Audiobook's eyes opened wide. Cal, who was looking at the diary, did not notice this as he continued to speak. I heard that all dragons have their own colors. Are half-bloods different? Audiobook was the only white-gold dragon in the world. Whether they were red dragons, blue dragons, or whatever other color dragon, they were all unique in color. That was why dragons did not even have the same color as their parents. For example, it was not abnormal for a situation like a white-gold dragon to be born from a red dragon and a blue dragon to occur. Cal looked toward Audiobook while thinking about the dragon half-blood who had different colored eyes than Rayon but the same black body. He then flinched. Iruhaben had a serious frown on his face. No, half-bloods are the same as dragons in that way. Dragon half-bloods were born with dragon blood as well. That is why the human body cannot handle it. It was impossible for a human to handle the instincts of their dragon's blood to be unique. Iruhaben heard Cal continuing to speak. Witira said that it seemed as if the dragon half-blood had finished his second growth phase as well. The ancient dragon had expected that the dragon half-blood had completed his first growth phase. However, he could only think about one thing after hearing that it had survived the second growth phase as well. Iruhaben continued to frown as Cal quietly observed him. The ancient dragon and the human then made eye contact. The human could see fear in the ancient dragon's eyes. Is that bastard really a half-blood? That fear soon changed into anger. Cal subconsciously answered back, thinking that Iruhaben's eyes were showing the wisdom that he had gained from living so long. I presume he is a half-blood because he has both dragon blood and human blood. I will need to see him myself. Iruhaben turned away from Cal and looked at the forest. Olean, the area belonging to the deceased dragon, had a vibrant green fragrance to it. However, his mind was in a mess. Something is weird. A murdered dragon, a fake dragon slayer, and a dragon half-blood. Rayon is a real dragon. This child's color is his own. We will get to find out his attribute once he finishes his first growth phase as well. Rayon was definitely a real dragon. He might be a bit peculiar, but this little kid was still an amazing dragon. But the half-blood was the same color as Rayon. Arm. That word repeated itself in Iruhaben's mind. The ancient dragon sighed as he commented. Something that goes against the laws of nature is happening. The good thing was that they had the opportunity to fix these things that were going against the laws of nature. Iruhaben looked toward the unlucky bastard. Everything was happening with this guy at the center. If Rayon had died, then the real black dragon would have disappeared from this world. Furthermore, this guy was also the one who had told them about the true identities of the dragon half-blood and the dragon slayer. It's still a long way away for the little kid to grow up. And I only have 1 year left. A dragon lord. He wouldn't need to worry about this if the dragon lord was here. However, nature had not assigned a dragon lord since long before Iruhaben was born. Iruhaben Nim, how about we tackle things one at a time? Ha! Iruhaben let out a chuckle. In some aspects, the guy with only 3 days left to live was the calmest. You're so calm even after hearing that you only have 3 days left. Isn't it all just a part of life? Cal Henitus, no, Kim Rock-Soo was not really affected by the current situation. In fact, he was hopeful since he had learned that there was a clue that would help him resolve this issue. Squirm, squirm. The hidden front paw of the black dragon, who was in a bundle of blankets on top of the soft grass, was squirming. He was shaking, similar to a baby who was trying to flip over for the first time. However, Rayon soon started to frown before his body became limp again. The ancient dragon settled his thoughts as he listened to the human who was saying that was just a part of life. Go ahead and read what it says. They needed to take care of the most pressing issues first. Cal started to read the diary again after seeing Iruhaben point to it. It was the only page that was written in the language of the Western continent. Cal's expression slowly turned odd as he read through the page. It was talking about the region with Mount Lib and Liban City. There had always been a lot of monsters there, however. The monsters started to disappear one day. Cal and Iruhaben had come here in order to figure out the reason as well. The dragon, Olean, had been curious about that reason as well. A lake. Cal was certain that this location was where the Water of Judgment was located. His face stiffened up after reading what was written after that, judging the monsters. He recalled how the owner had been obsessed with fighting. How did the lake judge the monsters and humans? What was the criteria of the lake, and how did it do it? He was full of questions. It was hard to imagine what could have happened. Cal recalled the bandit leader he had looted in Mount Lib. He had indicated that there were still monsters around Liban City, but that the number had decreased, allowing mercenaries and merchants to be active in the area. Cal slowly read the information that was written in the back. Resembles a god. Did it resemble the god of war? Cal felt as if he had a headache. He had already needed to use his shield, the pillar of water, and even the stone spears. So if, and really just if, he ever had to use this power after gaining it, just thinking about it is terrible. Then forget a slacker life. He would need to figure out a way to lay low and live in seclusion. But it wasn't like he could easily find any other water-type ancient powers in the next 3 days. Iruhaben, who did not know about what Cal was thinking, gently consoled him. I think that the barrier around the lake prevented people from seeing it. The coordinates for the barrier are listed here, so we can just teleport there and enter the barrier. Iruhaben then stopped for a moment before he continued to speak in a concerned tone. However, even if I get rid of the barrier for you, you will need to earn the ancient power on your own as you've done with the others. You need to overcome the trial that the power gives you. Those were all trials. Yes, I see. Cal blankly recalled the trials where he had to deliver bread to the tree, destroy the stone tower, dig underwater in order to free the top, throw money into lava, and finally, chew rocks. Cal could not even fathom what kind of extraordinary thing he would have to do this time. However, he was not too worried as it was still better than fighting and getting bloody. Cal held Rayon back up as he continued to speak. It looks like Liban City is nearby based on the coordinates, so let's stop by there first. Sure, Screech. Hope and Adventure Loving Inn. The people in the inn, with quite the long name, were still working hard in order to fix up the place before the grand opening. The door to that inn slowly opened. A bandit who was making a tablecloth continued to look at the tablecloth as he shouted in a blunt voice. Hey. Ditching will result in 1 glove. Why do you even try when you know you'll get caught? Unless you run fast enough to make the dust fly up. No, there is no dust here. Do you wish to be the dust of the world? No. Then shut up and just do. You're the bandit suddenly stopped. There were 5 bandits in the hall, including him. However, the others were all being too quiet when one of them was running away, and the voice that just responded was very familiar. Plop. The tablecloth in the bandit's hand fell to the ground. The tablecloth fluttered like a butterfly as it fell, and the person who came in picked it up. We can't let it get dirty. Am I right? The bandit could see the person's red hair. It was the person who was scarier than the white glove and the old man. He subconsciously started to speak. That is right, sir. Dust is evil. We must get rid of it. Tablecloths must be completely white. Cal tilted his head to the side after seeing the bandit receiving the tablecloth from him with shaking hands. Why is he acting like this? Why is he so scared? Cal had told the team to make sure that the bandits were well fed and well clothed. It was because he was going to make them be the servers, and Beecrox had followed his orders properly and fed them well. It was just that the kitchen assistant bandit, who had seen the way Beecrox used his kitchen knife, had told the others about it, making them all scared to the point that they couldn't tell whether the food was going into their noses or mouths. Cal looked at the 5 bandits who were quietly working with a weird expression before someone suddenly started to speak from behind him. You're here, young Master Nim. You returned earlier than I expected. Egu, so scary. Cal was shocked at Ron, who approached without making any noises before signaling him with his eyes to say, let's go to the 2nd floor. Cal headed to the 2nd floor with Ron as Iruhaben following behind them. Beecrox came out of the kitchen to follow them as well. There were some footsteps coming to greet Cal when he got to the 2nd floor. You're here. You came back fast. I wanted to see you. Looks like our youngest is sleeping. On and Hong were excited as they came to greet Cal. However, their expressions changed once Cal went into one of the rooms and opened up the blankets in order to lay Rayon down on the bed. Meow. Meow. On and Hong must have been shocked as they meowed like cats instead of speaking like humans before curling up next to either side of Rayon. Cal informed the group of Rayon's current situation. He's in his first growth phase. Rayon is fighting against himself right now. His eyes are closed, but he can hear everything that we are saying. On and Hong stopped meowing like cats once they heard that. Then they started to mumble while still remaining by Rayon's side. Beast people are said to be in pain during their first berserk transformation as well. We can't have our youngest being in pain. Our youngest is great and mighty, even without growing up. Cal watched on and Hong say all of that while sticking next to Rayon before turning his head. He could see Ron and Beacrox's expressions. The two of them had vicious occupations, but were also very emotional people. Cal left the children averaging 9 years old with a Ruhaben before heading out of the room. He signaled Ron with his eyes to follow him. Click. The door opened and closed. Cal and Ron made eye contact in the empty hallway. Young Master Nim, is something wrong? I'm guessing that the war is not over yet. He really is like a ghost. Cal knew that the sharp Ron would understand that something was weird. That was why he had called him out separately. Ron? Yes, young Master Nim. He was a scary old man, but in some aspects, he was his most trustworthy person. Cal was not very worried because he thought that this situation was quite hopeful right now. He had a feeling that things would work out. His instincts that he had developed over the years were telling him that he would not die. However, you always had to prepare for the worst. Cal had told Crown Prince Alberu the truth. Although he didn't know whether Alberu would tell the others about his situation, they were currently in the middle of a war. There was no way to tell what might happen. He needed to prepare for the others in the group learning about his situation, as well as if the war suddenly turned for the worse. Cal did not hesitate to pick Ron Malan as one of those people to help him prepare for the worst possible scenario. Although he was not the eldest in their group, he was the eldest human, as well as someone who knew how to guide the rest of their group. He was the first person Kim Rock-Soo saw when he opened his eyes in this world, as well as the person he had spent the most time with since entering this world. That was why Cal calmly informed Ron about his current condition. 3 days, no, 2 days and 8 hours. What are you counting down? Ron could see Cal starting to smile. His calm voice filled the hallway. That's the remaining time for the bomb inside my body. Ron's cold eyes shook for a moment. However, Ron could see that Cal's pupils did not shake at all. That calm gaze made Ron calm down as well. Cal continued to speak without any hesitation. I will come back after removing the bomb. Cal asked Ron for a favor. That is why I need you to take care of business as usual, please. As usual, as if nothing had happened. Ron hesitated in front of Cal for the first time before closing his eyes. Cal, who was waiting for a response, heard the Super Rock's voice in his head. Are you trying to become stronger? No, I don't want to do that at all. It was the moment Cal was about to oppose the statement. He heard someone else start to speak in his mind. Are you good at cussing? What? It was a familiar voice. It was the voice of the money-crazed owner of the fiery thunderbolt. He was suddenly speaking. He was the one who had created that sea of fire that Cal believed the water of judgment had put out. The parchment paper inside the ancient dragon Olian's diary had something written about the fiery thunderbolt as well. The owner of the water of judgment and the fire of destruction seemed to be pretty close to each other. The fiery thunderbolt continued to speak. The first hit has to be a straight. To defeat him, cussing at the start is the best. Cal brushed his eyes with his hands. Or try to convince him that you will cause trouble. Then he might follow you. He wrote his letter of resignation with me. You wrote that crazy letter of resignation together. That is why I know him a bit. We developed a bond while fighting after realizing that we both have similar values. It was easier to talk to him than that stuffy old man world tree. These crazy owners of ancient powers, none of them are normal. Young Master Nim? Life is so hard, Ron. Ron's face, that usually had a benign smile or a cold gaze, had a new expression after seeing Cal sincerely looking tired. Cal did not manage to see that expression as he had to deal with the cheapskate fire that had suddenly popped out. I will help you. By the way, do you have some money? Don't you want to strengthen the fiery thunderbolt? Aren't you curious about the strength of the fiery thunderbolt that could burn up the entire northern region of the western continent? Don't you want to have the fire that made even Old Man World Tree faint? Absolutely not. He did not want to get the cheapskate's help at all. So hard. Ron's face ended up in a frown after hearing Cal's mumblings. Chapter 253. 3 days 4. Cal flinched after seeing the frown on Ron's face. Ron quickly got rid of the frown before he returned to his usual benign smile after seeing Cal flinch. Is it that difficult? Cal urgently started to speak after seeing the assassin's face change so quickly. No, it's all right. It's just a little difficult. That was the truth. It was a little difficult. Can't you throw me some money like you did last time? Think about it. It's possible now because your plate is bigger. It was a little difficult because of this loud, fiery thunderbolt. The voice that suddenly popped out had a lot to say. Of course, the rambling soon stopped. The fiery thunderbolt stopped talking after telling Cal to think about it. Although I do want to throw money around like I did last time, he thought about how he threw a ton of money into the lava. Cal was happy at that time. He should have a lot of dirty money once he takes over the eastern continent's Liban city's underworld. Should I use that money? Cal was starting to get a bit excited. It was quite fun to throw money around, especially when it wasn't his money and instead was money he took from bad guys. Cal's expression turned calm, almost as if he had never been frowning in the first place. The corners of Ron's wrinkled eyes started to shake after seeing the change in Cal's expression. It was just the slightest of movements that nobody else would have noticed, but Ron was definitely agitated. 20 years old. This puppy young master of his was only 20 years old. Even if he was born a noble and had a strong sense of responsibility, 20 was an age where you should be running around large fields and trying to do what you dreamt of doing as a kid. Bicrox Malan. Ron thought about his son. He had escaped the eastern continent and run away to the Hennetus territory in the western continent when his son was only about 10 years old. During that time, Bicrox could not do a lot of the things that children would normally do, and thus had to quickly mature and grow up. But a youngster who was speaking as if he was older and had spent more time living than his son who had lived such a life was in front of him right now. It's all right. It's just a little difficult. As someone who has lived a long time, Ron could feel the weight of those words. The bomb inside Cal's body could only be talking about the ancient powers. Ron had heard about the issue inside Cal's body when they had first gone to Iruhaben's lair. He was certain that it was related to that. Ron remembered how Cal had given him a new arm and taken his revenge for him. As you wish, young Master Nim. Cal had asked Ron for a favor. As usual, please. Ron gently responded to Cal while thinking about that. I will act like my usual self. Yes, that's all you need to do. Cal felt as if Ron's words were oddly vicious, however. He still nodded his head after hearing that Ron would do as he wished. The next day, Cal prepared to leave early in the morning. Even with the vitality of the heart, he still needed to sleep 3 to 4 hours a day. Furthermore, Cal chose to sleep in order to help relieve some of the stress and fatigue he had gained during the battle. However, he could not help but be shocked at what he saw as soon as he woke up. What is going on right now? Cal saw Ron, who was handing him a cup of honey lemon tea as usual, and took the cup from him. The bitter taste woke Cal right up. Ron started to smile. Iruhaben Nim told me that Rayon Nim needs to go with you. Without knowing when the growth phase might end, Rayon was the safest around Iruhaben. Although he didn't like that he needed to carry around a sick child without letting him rest, Iruhaben said that it wouldn't be a burden at all. In fact, Rayon thinking that he was not safe and relaxed was the worst thing to have right now, so being next to Cal and Iruhaben was for the best. That was why they would take him with them. Of course, On and Hong would stay here. It would be bad if the 2 children went with them and figured out about Cal's situation. Even if Cal was someone who didn't care about other people's emotions, he didn't want to do that to children. He already didn't like the fact that Rayon knew about what was going on. That was why he put down the disappointed On and Hong. However, something larger stuck to him once he got rid of the 2 of them. That is why I brought an errand boy for you. He is used to cooking and all other aspects of service, so he should be useful to have around. Father, I am not an errand boy. Bicrox answered disgruntledly as he stood in front of Cal. He was his usual spotless self, but he had a larger carrier that looked like a baby sash but much larger. One Cal looked at that carrier and then looked at Bicrox and Ron. He then shared his honest sentiments. Ron, you really are good at what you do. I just did what is expected of me, young Master Nim. Bicrox started to frown. However, he pretended not to hear his father and his young master speaking as he picked up the limp Rayon and put him in the carrier. He recalled the conversation he had with his father. Escort the young master Nim. Did something happen? His father had answered like this to that question. You're the only one I can rely on since I cannot go myself. He was able to realize that his father could not tell him the real reason, and that something serious was about to happen after hearing that response. That was why he put Rayon into the carrier and looked toward Cal, who stood up and started to speak. Let's go. Rustle. Cal listened to the sound of branches breaking under his feet as he looked around. Liban City had the inn. Mount Lib had the stone pillar. There was a large forest in the middle of these two areas. Cal looked at Beecrox and Rayon in the carrier before looking at Aruhaben. The name of this forest is the Grey Eye Forest. Grey Eye. The name alone was giving off an aura of mystery. Aruhaben explained to Cal, Beecrox, and Rayon about this place. It was not what he had read in the ancient dragon's diary, but public knowledge about the forest. They've been calling it that for a while, but nobody knows the reason behind the name. Although there are still monsters in every region around Liban City, there are no monsters in this Grey Eye Forest. Cal absorbed the scenery in front of him. It seemed to be a completely normal forest. It was even giving off the typical sounds you would hear from a forest. Since there are no monsters, mercenaries and merchants have no reason to come here. There are just a few people who come in during spring in order to pick some fruits. Have any of them gone missing? The water of judgment was said to judge both humans and monsters. No. There were no more dead monsters nor missing people thanks to the dead ancient dragon's barrier. Aruhaben looked toward the calm Cal and started to smile. Contrary to his voice, Cal's situation was not very good. Cal Henitus, I don't think you're in a situation to be so calm. Crackle, crackle. There was red lightning flowing through the tip of Cal's fingers. The fiery thunderbolt roamed around for a bit before starting to become brighter. Boom, boom, boom. The vitality of the heart was responding more than anything else. It was beating crazily, as if it had found a way to maintain his body and keep him alive. Cal slowly started to smile. His gaze was headed near Aruhaben. Aruhaben Nim, why do you ask such a question after you've already finished all of your preparations? There was white gold smoke around Aruhaben right now. He chuckled at Cal's question before he stomped on the ground. The barrier. He could feel the traces of Olean, the dead ancient dragon. The center of the Grey Eye Forest. The scent of fresh trees was rising up from that area. Aruhaben headed toward that scent. Follow me. Cal watched Aruhaben start to move before activating the sound of the wind. At the same time, he looked toward Beecrox, who sighed before starting to run. I am very good at following people. He had learned how to run when he had followed his father and escaped from the eastern continent to the western continent as a child. It was not very hard just running while looking at his father's back. Cal watched as Beecrox rushed past him before kicking off the ground as well. Cal could hear the sound of the leaves rustling in the wind, as well as sound of the branches hitting his sleeves. However, the beating of his heart was the clearest thing he could feel right now. He had an odd feeling at that moment. Not good. He was currently using the sound of the wind with the fiery thunderbolt crackling in his hand. Cal felt something different than his usual hunger and blood coughing. He felt woozy. It felt as if his insides were being swept up by waves. Cal could now feel his insides that were not being protected by the super rock like his indestructible skin. Although his plate had gotten bigger, that plate was still too weak. A larger glass plate was still made of glass. Boom, boom, boom. The vitality of the heart made its presence known to the point that Cal could feel how destroyed his insides were. At that moment, Cal raised his head after hearing a loud noise. Bang! White gold mana became an arrow that shot forward. It looked as if the arrows were flying toward a normal part of the forest. However, it was the moment those arrows hit that normal forest, bang, green branches appeared and started to attack them. Ha! He always did have an odd taste. Aruhaben laughed as the disgusting green branches suddenly appeared and charged toward them. However, he did not stop walking. In fact, he started to walk faster as he continued to send mana arrows out. We will pierce right through them. Cal followed behind the ancient dragon, who showed no hesitation. Bang! The branches exploded into dust every time a mana arrow hit them. He heard Iruhaben's voice at that moment. A dragon does not necessarily need to have a natural attribute. It could just be an abstract element or something completely unique as well. Bang! Boom! Boom! The white gold dragon pierced through the barrier as he shared his attribute with the little kid and Cal. People mocked me when I first found out my attribute. The other dragons had laughed at Iruhaben once he had figured out his attribute after his first growth phase. That mocking had continued even after he had become an adult dragon. My attribute was terrible compared to how I look. Iruhaben, who was more handsome than most dragons, had no choice but to be mocked because of his attribute. There were a lot of dragon children with terrible personalities. Cal looked toward Iruhaben's back. He could not tell what attribute made up this white gold color. Bang! The moment Cal watched another branch explode, he could hear Iruhaben's voice. Dust or powder? Cal's eyes watched as the branches crashed into the white gold mana and disappeared like dust. Iruhaben had destroyed the stone pillar at the Super Rock Villa by turning it into dust as well. That is my attribute. Iruhaben liked his attribute. Why? And it is a quite wonderful attribute. He did not leave those dragons who mocked him alone. He had fought against them. Because my personality was to beat people up until the dust flew off the ground or they turned into dust. He had never lost a battle ever since he became an adult dragon. Even if people point their fingers and laugh at you, your value is determined by how you view yourself, not by them. There was a reason Iruhaben was saying all of this to Cal and Rayon. In nature, and in this world, there is a reason and meaning behind everything that exists. He had heard about the water of judgment from Cal as they were returning to the inn from the dead ancient dragon's lair. He had also read the diary in order to find out that it was an arrogant power that resembled a god. Cal, it is all up to how you choose to accept the will of the ancient power, the water of judgment. Although the name might sound scary, and it was supposedly like a god, it was still a power used by a human in the end. The value of that power would be determined by the thoughts of its owner. Iruhaben turned the final branch into dust before he went into the barrier. Cal, who had walked up next to him at some point, started to speak as they entered the barrier. "Thank you for your advice." Iruhaben smiled before it quickly disappeared. Tap! Iruhaben winced the moment his foot touched the ground. Needles. He felt something that felt as if numerous needles were poking at his skin. He could see the lake at the same time. Cal's calm voice reached his ears at that moment. "I see why they call it the Gray Eye Forest." A lake in the shape of a human eye was in front of them. The color of the water in that lake was gray. Cal saw Beacrox stepping behind Iruhaben. It was as if his instincts were telling him to go hide behind the strongest person with Rayon on his back. I have never seen such a strong ancient power before. Iruhaben felt as if he could understand why it was called an arrogant power. A violent feeling of needles stabbing at your skin. "Are you okay?" Iruhaben asked Beacrox, who was behind him, and Beacrox shook his head. The ancient dragon immediately created a shield for him. Beacrox looked much better once the shield was created. He was at a loss for words the moment he saw the lake. He had this eerie feeling that someone had tied him up and was observing him. It was a terrible feeling. It was a disgusting feeling. It was a power that he did not want to be near nor even see. Beacrox gulped and looked away from the lake. Twitch. He lowered his head at that moment. He had felt movement from inside the carrier just now. Beacrox had lowered his head to see if Rayon had woken up, however, Rayon was still limp. Beacrox observed Rayon for a while before hugging the carrier. He thought he had made a mistake. However, the sensitive dragon who could not see nor speak could still hear and feel. He felt the eerie feeling as well. Rayon understood Cal's situation and that he would go on to win this power. The black dragon's heart started to beat wilder than ever before. Iruhaben did not know about this as he looked toward Cal and asked, "I haven't felt something so violent in a long time. Should I create a shield for you? It will probably be difficult, even with your shield." He could not finish his sentence. Boom, the ground started to shake. Cal heard the fiery thunderbolt's voice again. "Wow, damn it." I knew he was a cool guy. He's taking the initiative just like I taught him to do. What? Cal turned his head without being able to respond to the voice after feeling the vibration traveling up his legs. The lake was shooting up into the sky. Ch-ch-ch-ch. The gray water turned into a large spear. It looks ready to attack at any moment. You don't just earn ancient powers with weird methods. Cal started to frown. The ground was still shaking, while the spear that shot up from the lake was starting to become sharper. See, ch-ch-ch-ch-ch-ch. The tip of that spear was directed right at Cal. In order to earn an ancient power, the person who wishes to take the power must tackle it on their own. Do I need to fight? Do I need to win against that spear? Didn't they say I just need to cuss, land the first hit, and convince him to cause trouble with me? He shouldn't have believed these crazy ancient powers. Cal had a disgusted frown on his face. It was at that moment. Ugh. Beacrox groaned from inside the shield. The violent aura was giving him a migraine. Iruhaben created another shield layer around him before he looked toward Cal. He had not expected something like this either. I've never felt such a violent and aggressive ancient power before. Will you be okay? Can you do it? The ancient dragon who was asking with concern flinched. A violent aura. Cal sounded confused. Iruhaben could see that Cal was frowning but did not seem to be in pain. You can't feel anything? You don't sense anything in this area? No, sir. It is just so-so. I just feel like it would hurt if I was pierced by that spear. Iruhaben was at a loss for words. He doesn't feel anything. It's strong enough to even make an ancient dragon like me hesitate. He could understand why the ancient dragon Olian chose to put a barrier around this area. Cal really was fine. However, he could tell that something was odd based on Iruhaben and Beacrox's reactions. Boom. The ground shook once again. To be more specific, the lake was rumbling, making the aftershocks reach Cal. The tip of the gray spear pointed toward Cal. It was as if it was asking for a fight. That thought would end up being correct. He could hear the voice of the fiery thunderbolt. Looks like we need to fight first. He's a guy who really likes to fight. Did he choose his trial to be a fight as well? Cal started to frown. Fuck. I need to find when I'm already feeling woozy. It was the moment Cal let out a sigh. The gray spear started to move. Iruhaben flinched after seeing the incoming spear. Should I help Cal? But he won't be able to get the ancient power if I do that. The ancient dragon started to frown as he took a step toward Cal. However, he did not take any more steps after that. He could see Cal's face. He was smiling. Cal could see the gray spear flying toward him. He could hear the fiery thunderbolt's voice at the same time. He could not help but laugh after hearing what it had to say. He could never win against any of us. The fire of destruction recalled a memory from a long time ago. We drew many times. A repressed power cannot defeat a free power. It was one thing if it repressed itself, however. A power that was repressed by another entity would not be able to win against a power that has the option to make its own decisions. The fiery thunderbolt thought about two existences that had freely made their own goals and responsibilities, unlike the water of judgment. He always lost to the glutton and the stubborn super rock. The glutton and the stubborn one, wood and earth. The indestructible shield and the scary giant cobblestone. The repressed power had never won against them. Furthermore, the dominator dominates over the judge as well. Cal recalled the small amount of the dominating water he still had in his possession. Boom. He could feel the ground shake once again. At the same time, he saw a silver shield opening up toward the spear. The trial to earn an ancient power. Cal still had powers that would allow him to overcome this wall. Chapter 254. Eat up one. Bang. The spear clashed against the shield. Ugh. Cal grabbed his stomach. He felt woozy. It felt as if his insides would turn over. It was different than the feeling he felt every so often when he used the vitality of the heart. The glass plate that had become as weak as possible was causing Cal pain. Damn it. Red blood. A drop of blood dripped from Cal's mouth to his chin and then onto the ground. The color of that drop of blood was red. It was different than the black, dead blood that usually came out. The fishy smell of blood started to fill the area around the lake that looked like a gray eye. Squirm, squirm. Beacrox saw it this time. The black dragon's front paws were moving. The front paws were shaking and visibly moving, little by little. The fishy smell of blood was making the young black dragon's heart beat even faster. Thump, thump. He was sure that it was Cal's blood. Rayon wanted to hurry up and open his eyes in order to see what was going on. However, the young dragon was looking at a different world right now. The young dragon had to move around in his dreams since his first growth phase started. No, he needed to face a trial that imitated a dream. His instincts were telling him that he needed to pass this trial in order to fight alongside Cal. However, it was hard to overcome quickly. Rayon looked over his body. Short front paws, short body, and tiny wings. All of them were full of injuries. He was fighting without resting. However, he could not use mana nor magic in this dream. A dragon who had not gone through its first growth phase and could not use magic was extremely weak. Rayon looked down under his feet. He had seen this ever since the dream-like trial had started. The young dragon could see people grabbing onto his ankles. Cal, On, and Hong, Goldie Gramps, Choi Han, Rosalind, Ron, Locke, Mary, Beecrox, etc. Too many people were holding onto Rayon's ankles. Rayon had to fight with these people holding onto him. He could see a dragon in the sky when he looked up. It was a large dragon that was incomparable to his short self. Although most adult dragons were 20 meters in length, this large dragon was close to 30 meters in length. The dragon was black in color while its eyes were dark blue. Rayon's instincts were telling him something. That dragon is me. That dragon is me as an adult. It was a dragon that was flying alone freely in the sky without anybody holding onto its ankles. I need to fight and win against that dragon. His instincts as a dragon were telling him that defeating his future self was the only way to overcome this trial. That was why Rayon was fighting against this large black dragon. However, he did not have a chance of victory. He was too weak to win against a strong dragon. However, Rayon could not just choose to give up even though he knew that this was the case. It was because he could hear and smell what was going on in the real world. Fuck! He could hear his weak human's voice in the world outside of this trial. It was the way he talked whenever he was frustrated or annoyed. Rayon lowered his head. It was not the voice of the person grabbing onto his ankles in this trial, but the voice of his human in the real world. The human had said that he only had 3 days. This smell of blood is our human's smell. I need to save him. Rayon flew back up into the sky. It was extremely difficult to fly because of the people holding onto his ankles. However, he did not stop flapping his wings. It was because he did not despise the people holding onto his ankles. Rayon charged once more toward the large black dragon that was looking down at him. Rayon was not scared. He was just afraid that he would be too late to return to reality, the person who was dealing with things in the real world that Rayon was desperate to get back to could not help but swear. Ugh, motherfucker. Cal's expression looked as terrible as possible as he coughed up blood and continued to swear. His insides were rumbling and felt as if they would flip over. Furthermore, he was going nuts after seeing all of the red blood that he was continuing to cough up. Bang. The gray water spear and the silver shield crashed together once again. Although there was a loud noise, the silver shield was fine and did not even shake a little. The problem was that the water spear that was aiming for Cal was fine as well. See it. The shape of the spear broke down right after slamming into the shield. However, it quickly returned its form and shot toward Cal once again. Bang! 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 The silver shield and water spear continued to slam into each other as if they wanted to gulp the other up. Cal wiped the blood away from his mouth as he glared at the gray water spear. His body's plate had reached its limit. His insides were roaring in ways that were incomparable to the wooziness he felt when he was using the sound of the wind to travel. That was why he could not use the indestructible shield nor the scary giant cobblestone as much as he wanted to. He always lost to the glutton and the stubborn super rock. That was what the fire of destruction had told him. However, the opportunity to fully use those powers was not available for him. However, Cal's eyes were calmly looking at the lake and the water spear. One chance. He could only use the super rock once with the shield activated. One chance. Cal repeated that to himself as he blocked the water spear with the shield again. Bang! Loud noises echoed throughout the area once again. The ancient dragon Iruhaben started to frown while watching the fight, the water of judgment. It was cold and ruthless. He felt an unbelievable power coming from the water spear. It was a power that seemed ready to execute a sinner immediately. Something is weird. Something truly was weird. The ancient powers that Iruhaben knew about were all lacking to be the main source of power. However, some of the ancient powers that this unlucky Kalhenitus had in his possession were as strong as, if not stronger than, most strong individuals' strengths. Iruhaben started to frown. He could feel Kalhenitus's rumbling insides. His plate was about to break. This ancient power was said to be an arrogant power that was almost like a god. But Kalhenitus's current condition was not at his best to be able to win against such an ancient power. Can he win? Was it even possible with his current condition? It was difficult even for this wise ancient dragon to determine. However, there was something that he did know. It is difficult using standard methods. The ancient dragon Iruhaben's eyes opened wide at that moment. Ooh, the lake rumbled once more. The ancient dragon touched his arm. He was getting the chills. Iruhaben heard Kal's voice at that moment. "This is driving me nuts. They're all crazy, all lunatics. Damn it." Kal could not hold back from shouting. Something was coming up from the bottom of the lake. They were chains made out of water. Chains were shooting up from the bottom of the lake as if they were ready to shackle the hands and feet of the sinner. A water spear and now chains. Kal started to frown. He felt frustrated. They were quiet. Those loud voices of the ancient powers were all being quiet. Now that he thought about it, the other voices of the ancient powers all went quiet whenever he was trying to earn another power. Multiple chains shot up from the water. They then clanked as they stuck to the water spear. They looked as if they were going to attack Kal alongside the water spear. Damn it. For being the water of judgment, it uses some weird shit. It was when Kal subconsciously voiced his frustration. It's not me. It was the voice of a woman. A clear voice that seemed to be echoing inside a cave filled Kal's mind. It was the water of judgment. He was sure of it. He always heard the voice of the owner of the ancient power whenever he was about to finish the trials. No, this isn't me. Ugh. Kal put his hand up to his ears. The calm voice in his mind suddenly turned into a screech. See. At the same time, the chains and the spear combined together in order to become an extremely large spear. Furthermore, the surface of the lake started to tremble. This isn't my power. This is not me. I am not a judge. Not a judge. Kal's gaze quickly changed. I am. That was all the ancient power kept saying. That voice was giving him a headache. That was why he subconsciously commented. Then who are you? If you are not the water of judgment, then who are you? Everybody calls you the water of judgment. It was at that moment. He heard a quiet voice. I am someone who does not have freedom. Screech, screech, the odd noise made Kal lift his head up. The large water spear surrounded by chains was aiming at Kal. Just looking at it made it hard to breathe. The ancient dragon who was watching this said what came to his mind. You are chained down by a god. I am chained. Kal could hear the owner of the ancient power in his mind. She was chained by a god using shackles called responsibility and duty. She had to be repressed by an identity that she was not born with. She was chained the moment that she was born, and then that god gave her a name as soon as he found her. Then he gave her to the people. I wished to get out of them. I escaped and ran away to the corner of the eastern continent, however. I had already forgotten about who I truly was. Free me. It wanted to return to its original identity. The power that a god cherished, but had no choice but to chain down, wanted to be used freely at least once. The god gave me the name of the water of judgment. However, I have a name that I gave myself. A name that she gave herself. She wanted to use that name. Ancient powers always give themselves names. I lost the chance to give myself a name. I want a new chance to give myself a name. And she found someone who could give me that chance. She could feel the powers of the people who helped her escape to the eastern continent a long time ago. They had helped her write a letter of resignation, caused a fire in order to create a diversion, and then defended against the white snakes with a shield. They also gave her a ride on the wind to help her move, and finally, gave her a body that was as strong as his own boulder. There was also a nice person who consoled her and was her conversation buddy. In the end, they had sacrificed themselves for the world. She could smell their scent. It was coming from this person. I am not a judge. The gray lake started to tremble. Water is something that naturally flows from top to bottom. The laws of nature indicated that water would flow from top to bottom. That was how it was meant to be. However, she was someone who went against the laws of nature. That was why a god cherished her but had to chain her down, forcing her to be with the humans. The owner of the ancient power had only said the name she gave herself once she arrived at the eastern continent and had earned her freedom. I am the retrogressive water. Retrogressive. The one who defies the laws of nature. Her voice in Cal's mind slowly became quieter. The voice that sounded as if it was in a cave far away started to disappear. However, he could still clearly hear it. He could hear her last words. I am the sky eating water. It was the first name she gave for herself after throwing away the name of the water of judgment. The sky eating water. Screech, screech. Cal lifted his head up. The chains turned the tip of the water spear toward Cal once her voice disappeared. It is the traces of a god. Nobody could hear what Iruhaben just said. It was because the water ate up the noise. A large gray spear was shot toward Cal. At the same time, the chains shot out while trying to tie Cal's limbs down. No, this is not okay. He can't do it. Iruhaben felt a power that went against the laws of nature in the chains and water spear. This was something that Cal could not handle. Cal Henatus? Iruhaben had no choice but to shoot some white gold mana toward Cal and start to run toward him. However, Iruhaben could not stand next to Cal. Cal smiled while looking at the chains and water spear that were heading toward him. The retrogressive water. He liked this name quite a bit. It was much better than the water of judgment. Cal could not hear the voices of the owners of the ancient powers. However, he could feel the other ancient powers making their presences known around his body. Cal looked directly at the water spear and started to speak. Then I will go in reverse as well. Cal's body shot forward. The sound of the wind became Cal's feet. Cal turned his head and smiled toward his group. They seemed to be anxious. Cal's feet left the ground. His feet were walking where he should not be able to walk, as if he was water that was aiming for the sky that it could not reach. The results of that soon reached Cal's ears. The gray eye lake. Cal jumped into the lake. He was certain the water could not touch him. Cal chose to sink into the lake. Chapter 255. Eat up too. Cal's body started to sink to the bottom of the lake. It was difficult to see clearly, as if the inside of the lake was filled with fog. One only, the red blood dripping out of Cal's mouth, followed the flow of water and added color to the lake. Boom, boom, boom. Cal's body started to shake. The lake was rumbling. It was rumbling in rhythm, as if it was someone's heartbeat. Cal's head was shaking with the rumbling as the voice that had disappeared came back. I was born a slave. The voice echoed throughout the lake, the water of judgment. No, the voice of the sky eating water returned. I don't know who my parents are, since the only thing I remember are the chains around my ankles. But one day, a god came to find me. My first memory was about the chains around my ankle. A god came to visit the woman who had heard thousands of times that her roots were that of a slave. He told me I had talents before he freed me from slavery. He told me that I had talents that could be used for the world. That was how the god destroyed my first chains. However, he placed a new chain on me instead. The name of that chain was called the Water of Judgment. This second chain was not on my ankles, but on my heart. People revered me for having the attention of a god and trusted that I would take care of their problems. However, there were some people who wanted to use me instead, and they were the ones that put chains back on my ankles. It was the moment a third chain was about to be placed on her. I ran away. It was the only time in her life that she was happy. She was out of breath running away, however, she was happy. I met some people who were willing to help me and ran away to the eastern continent. However, I ran away alone. The people who had helped her escape had chosen to place chains over their own ankles and remain on the western continent. They said that they had something to do. All of them had said that they had something to do and remained in that land to fight. That was how she had run away. That was how she had become free. Boom, boom, boom. The inside of the lake started to rumble faster. At the same time, Cal's body started to shake intensely as if he had been caught in a current, and inside that fog-like lake. Something was cutting through the fog and approaching Cal. Clang, they were the chains. The half-transparent chains made out of water shot up from the bottom of the lake and rushed toward Cal at a fast speed. He heard her voice at that moment. She sounded as if she was laughing, but I didn't know how to live a free life. I had never lived like that before. I was free, but I didn't know how to live a free life. The rumbling inside the lake became stronger. The chains were not affected by the rumbling as they continued to approach Cal. The chains that arrived quickly started to tie Cal's limbs down as he tried to regain his bearings. Cal started to frown. Clang, clang. The chains tied up Cal's limbs and started to pull him down to the bottom of the lake. They were pulling him to the bottom as if they wanted to never let him leave again. The lake shook violently at that moment. Boom, Cal let out a breath. Ugh! The chains shook a bit. The lake started to move even more violently. Cal's body was shaking while the firm chains finally started to shake wildly as well. Boom! Boom! The rumbling became even stronger in the end. Even the chains ended up being swept up by the current, run away. The woman's voice filled Cal's mind. Her voice started to sound far away as if she headed back into the deep part of a cave. He could hear her faint voice. I cannot rule over these chains. It was at that moment. Cal started to smile. The reason he was able to last this long in the water started to reveal itself. Ooh-wong, a blue light started to come out of his neck. It was a pure blue color that could not be seen in this fog-like lake. It was the item that was allowing Cal to be the freest inside the water, the dominating water. Cal started to use the small amount of water that he had left. A blue light started to surround his body. Even if it was only a small amount, its nature was that of domination. Crackle, crackle, crackle. The chains that had tied up his limbs started to break apart. Cal gently brushed the rest of the chains away from his body. Is that a power of domination? Cal tilted his neck to stretch as the woman spoke in his mind. His pupils were not as cloudy as the fog inside the lake. His pupils that had a purpose were clear. Why would I run away? Cal would not run from a battle that he could win. His body quickly headed toward the bottom of the lake. He was not sinking because of the chains nor any other foreign powers. Cal's goal was at the bottom. His body continued to sink to the deepest part of the lake. There was no way for the others outside the lake to know about this. This was especially the case for Beacrox, who could not detect anything in this needle-like area. However, he could see that the water spear suddenly stopped moving and that the chains suddenly sank into the lake. The chains looked as if they were moving in order to look for Cal. The chains were moving while making those eerie noises. Beacrox's feet were twitching as if they were ready to run toward the lake. However, he did not move. He recalled Cal's face as he jumped into the lake. Cal was smiling when he jumped in. His face showed no signs of fear, as if he was telling them not to worry about him. The Cal that Beacrox knew would not do something that didn't have a chance of success, as he always calmly assessed the situation. There must be a reason for such a person to jump into the lake. I guess I need to wait. It was the moment he was thinking that he just needed to wait. Beacrox wondered if he may have thought wrong after seeing the expression on Iruhaben's face. Iruhaben? Iruhaben did not say anything. He just continued to frown while looking at the lake. It could not be helped. Cal Henitus had jumped into the lake as if he had a plan. Knowing the usual Cal, he should not be worried at all. However, something was odd. I can't feel him. He could not feel Cal Henitus's aura from the moment he jumped into the lake. That aura that was full of nature could not be felt at all. His aura had disappeared instantly, as if it had been cut off from this world. There was an existence that realized this even faster than Iruhaben. Thump. Thump. The black dragon's heart was going wild. the young dragon who was the most sensitive to Cal's existence and aura, so Rayon instantly realized that it had suddenly disappeared. Rayon could hear a lot of noises. That was why he had a decent idea about what was going on. The intelligent dragon suspected that Cal had either jumped into the lake or that something in the lake was preventing him from feeling Cal's aura. However, Cal's absence was too clearly felt by the young dragon. He could not feel Cal's aura at all. Thump. Thump. Iruhaben was there, as well as Beacrox. That is why he knew that nothing major would happen to Cal. This was something he knew for sure. However, the look in Rayon's eyes started to change. "Little kid, don't worry about Cal." Iruhaben's voice from outside the dream reached Rayon's ears. However, Rayon Meru was not satisfied with such words. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Time continued to pass, but he could not feel the human's aura at all. This was the first time something like this had happened. He had never experienced Cal being absent. Rayon Meru raised his head. The trial ground inside of his dreams. The large dragon was still looking down at him. Rayon was thinking that he needed to defeat that dragon in order to wake up from this dream. He needed to get out. He needed to get out of this trial as quickly as possible. What should he do when he was up against such a strong individual? The young dragon, who was flapping his wings even with all of the people hanging onto his ankles, ignored his injuries as he thought about how he could defeat a stronger opponent. In the past, the black dragon had worried about what to do when he met a strong enemy like another dragon. It was at that moment the black dragon's pupils became cloudy. He recalled a conversation he had with Cal at some point in the Super Rock Villa. It was when he was hiding under the blankets in disappointment, after not being able to enter his first growth phase, wondering about what to do if he ever met another dragon and had to fight it. What if I meet a dragon with a terrible personality? Cal had responded like this to his concern. "I thought you were smart. I am smart?" "No, I can't even grow." Cal had given him a very simple answer: just run away. What, just run away if you meet a terrible dragon? Scape. Cal had told him to run away if he met a stronger opponent without any hesitation. He continued on to tell him the reason. Staying alive is being great and mighty. Rayon. The black dragon raised his head and looked at the large dragon once again. He had been thinking that he needed to defeat that black dragon in order to overcome this trial. You survived the cave. However, Cal, his human's words filled Rayon's mind at that moment. Staying alive. That is being strong. Rayon could finally see clearly. Instead of the large dragon flying over his head, he could see the sky that was even bigger than that dragon. The sky was so vast that even the large dragon could not fill it up. It was even higher than the 30-meter-long dragon. Over there. It was not his instincts as a dragon, but the experiences that he had had until now that were telling Rayon what to do. The experiences and memories he had made with Cal were showing him a new path. Fighting and defeating that dragon was not the only way to get out of the trial. He just needed to change things up. He just needed to get out of this trial ground. Rayon started to smile. If someone was to see this smile, then they would say it was similar to Cal's smile. The young dragon started to flap his wings again. He had heard that a dragon's growth was a fight against himself. However, Rayon had realized something else. There was no need to fight against himself. The issue was this battlefield that made him have to fight against himself. Many paths became visible once his goal had changed. There was only one path heading toward that strong dragon. However, there were many ways to reach the sky that was even higher than that dragon. His path would be the one that he chooses to walk. The corners of the young dragon's lips continued to go up. A dragon that had grown up alone would not have had anyone to tell them about something like this. Dragons were selfish and violent creatures that were always on the alert, and thus preferred to be alone. However, Rayon had learned a lot of things from others. It was not important to win. The black dragon finally found the method that he liked the most. Let's run. That is not cheating. The important thing is for everyone to survive. Rayon Meru. The black dragon suddenly started to become happy. I can see my path. That black dragon is only covering a portion of the sky. He was looking beyond the sky. That's where I need to go. Rayon started to fly. He then pushed the people off of his ankles. These are all fake. That dragon and the people holding onto his ankles were all fake. This battlefield was fake. The real things were elsewhere, reality, walking the path that he had learned. That path was the true reality. He could see the connections he had made waiting for him at the end of that path. I will save them. Rayon started to fly. I cannot feel our weak human's aura. I need to hurry. He didn't care about his growth phase. He was already strong. If not, then he just needed to do as his human had told him to do, run away and then come back to strike them in the back. Survive and come back stronger in order to hit them when they least expect it. Then you will win. That's all he needed to do. Rayon continued to fly past the large dragon and past the sky into reality that was beyond it. He gave it his all in order to fly up there. It was hard to do so, but Rayon did not stop, and his flying caused some changes to happen. The mana that he could not use in his dream started to surround Rayon's body. Rayon had recovered his strength that the trial had sealed away from him. However, Rayon Meru did not know about this as he simply continued to fly up, focusing his gaze skyward and nowhere else. Somewhere else at the same time, the person who had been heading down for what seemed like an eternity finally arrived at his destination. Cal could see the bottom of the lake. He lifted his head up. The chains moved through the fog-like water in order to reach him. The chains continued to attack him even though the dominating water was giving off its aura of domination. They seemed as if they would stop only if they succeeded in chaining up Cal's limbs. They acted as if Cal was a sinner that needed to be judged. They were only aiming for Cal. Run away. The voice was louder than last time. Your aura of domination is getting weaker. Cal's dominating water was decreasing, just as she had mentioned, so run away. The lake rumbled again and changed the directions of the chains. However, Cal did not run away. Why does she keep telling me to run? Cal chuckled and stepped on the ground at the bottom of the lake. He was surrounded by water. It was so foggy that he couldn't properly see in front of him. The water was making his body sway, while he could still hear the chains cutting through the water in an attempt to reach him. However, the bottom of the lake was still the ground. Cal's insides were still churning. He did not want to experience having his insides churn like this ever again. That was why he made up his mind when he saw the lake. Let's flip the inside first. Cal stomped on the ground at the bottom of the lake. Boom, a loud noise that was incomparable to the other noises until now shook the inside of the lake. One chance. Cal could only use the Super Rock's power once. Cal used that one chance right now. The bottom of the lake. Large stone spears started to appear at the bottom of the lake. Cal did not get into fights that he would lose. This was a fight that he was going to win. 1. PR, is that possible even? If so, it sounds cool. Probably was more referring to the water being murky or cloudy, but we will leave it as is. Chapter 256. Eat up 3. Boom, Beacrox flinched because of the rumbling before he steadied himself. He then looked toward the lake. That large lake was rumbling. He was certain that young Master Cal had something to do with it. However, Beacrox could not help but say something else after looking at the lake. Iruhaben Nim, what is going on? Beacrox has a serious expression on his face as he supported the carrier with both hands. However, his expression was not as serious as Iruhaben's expression. The ancient dragon could not help but wipe his eyes with his hands. He was looking at Rayon, who was inside Beacrox's carrier. The ancient dragon's eyes looked concerned as he looked at Rayon. Black mana was slowly rising up from Rayon's body. The mana became thicker before slowly surrounding Rayon's body. Iruhaben could not believe it. You can't use mana when you are going through your first growth phase. The trial ground for the first growth phase. Dragons could not use mana nor magic at that location. Although it looked as if your mana was sealed only in the dream, it was sealed in the real world as well. That was why dragons faced a dangerous situation of the internal battle against itself, as well as external dangers from others as their bodies could not be protected with mana during the growth phase. That was how it was supposed to be. So how was it that this young dragon was releasing mana right now? This was not normal. This was different than what he had seen until now. Iruhaben had thought that Rayon would either take a really long time or a really short time to finish his first growth phase. However, even if he was quick, he didn't expect it to be this quick. How did the little kid defeat his future adult self so quickly? Iruhaben had no way of knowing what happened. A dragon faces its adult self during its first growth phase. That adult dragon could not use dragon's breath nor magic, and instead could only use its physical strength. However, it was still a scary existence for young dragons who could not use magic. That was why the growth phases were called a battle against themselves. A young dragon's potential was determined based on how long it took to finish the first growth phase, because they knew that the stronger adult dragons took longer to defeat. Of course, there was a way for young dragons to defeat their adult selves. It had to do with the dragon's attribute. The unique attribute that nobody else would have. The young dragons could defeat their future selves once that dormant attribute was activated, and the method and time it took to defeat their future selves were how their plate was determined. However, this little kid was different than everyone else. The ancient dragon's years of experience was telling him something. This little kid is not fighting against his future self right now. What is he fighting against? There was nothing other than your adult self in the trial ground. Just what was this little kid fighting against? Iruhaben could not hide his confusion and concern. However, Rayon was not fighting right now. In fact, he was going against the battlefield and trying to get out of it. He's laughing. Iruhaben could see that the young dragon was smiling, even as more mana and sweat covered Rayon's body and Rayon's fever worsened. The young dragon was not fighting right now. He was currently escaping the trial ground. Iruhaben could see Rayon's lips starting to open and close. It was the sign that he was about to wake up. He was still unconscious, but Iruhaben could hear Rayon mumbling quietly. I, Rayon Meru, am great and mighty. Ha! Iruhaben could not help but laugh. At the same time, his eyes curved into a smile. The reason Rayon was making him worry was because the mana that was sealed was released along with another reason. There was no plate. Forget creating a stronger plate. This young black dragon's plate was slowly disappearing. The plate that he currently had was breaking. That was what Iruhaben was worried about. However, the fact that there was no plate could mean something else. The world is his plate. He was overcoming something. This little dragon was overcoming something right now. The ancient dragon felt something shooting up from the bottom of the lake as he realized what was going on with Rayon. Beacrox's expression was starting to progressively worsen. Cal didn't say anything before jumping into the lake, while Iruhaben wasn't saying anything right now, so he could not help but frown with concern. Furthermore, even if he is a dragon, this little dragon was smiling oddly even though he was in pain. What the hell is going on? Beacrox's expression could not get better. He could not understand any of it as he was just an average chef and swordsman. It was at that moment. Boom, mm. Beacrox quickly hugged the carrier and steadied himself. A larger rumbling than earlier had shot up from the ground. What is going on in there? It was the moment his eyes headed toward the lake. The surface of the gray lake split open. Ha 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 ha, I'm about to go crazy. Ah ha ha ha, the ancient dragon was laughing. The lake split open. In fact, the lake split open in multiple locations. Stone spears started to shoot out from those split locations. There was someone standing on top of the largest stone spear. Cal Henatus. He was calmly standing on the stone spear while laughing. That was why Iruhaben could not help but laugh. Both the little kid and this unlucky bastard. The people struggling were smiling, so how could he not laugh as the eldest one in their group? Yes, destroy everything? Iruhaben was excited and said something that was fitting for his personality for the first time in a long time. This only made Beacrox's expression become worse, however. Nobody was able to see this. Cal was able to hear Iruhaben's voice clearly. However, he could not see the ancient dragon's face. All he could see was the color gray in front of his eyes. Clang, clang, tens of chains shot out from the lake following the stone spear. They were rushing at Cal as if they needed to capture him. Screech, screech. The chains started to quickly gather together. They continued to gather around the water spear that was already covered in chains, making it larger and larger. Cal was not planning to just watch as it happened. Instead, he was planning on doing as Iruhaben said by destroying everything. Break it. The stone spears started to move. Bang, bang. Bang explosions continued to occur as the stone spears destroyed the chains. Gray water splashed from all directions, wetting Cal in the process. Nothing was visible because of the battle between the water chains and the stone spears. What a mess. Cal looked at the mess in front of him and started to laugh. The broken chains reverted back to the water without being able to return to their previous forms. Chains really were useless after they were broken once. Cal looked at the water spear that still had a lot of chains wrapped around it. The water spear pointed its tip at Cal once again. I wish to get out of them. He could hear the voice of the ancient power's owner. Cal made the stone spears stop moving. There were many stone spears that were broken as well. Cal did not have the strength to make any more stone spears. He only had one chance as well. Of course, that chance was related to the super rock. Screech the water spear looked like a snake made out of chains as the chains screeched around it. You could not even see the original water spear anymore as it was covered in chains. However, Cal could see that the tip of the spear was shaking, even as it focused on him. You think that it is possible? He could hear the water spear's question. The chain snake soon charged toward Cal. Go. The stone spears followed Cal's command and charged toward the chain snake. There were less than last time, but the tens of stone spears that were shooting toward the chain snake looked like a grand spectacle. Screech. The chain snake ignored the stone spears as it charged toward Cal. Cal could hear the sound of the chain snake moving through the water and the stone spears cutting through the air. Cal, who was standing on the stone spear at the center of the lake, stretched his arm toward the sky the moment that the stone spears slammed into the chain snake. You have to do it properly if you're going to create a mess. Rumble and odd noise came from the sky. A red light came out of Cal's fingertips. He only had one chance to use the super rock. However, he still had many other powers that he could use as well. Crackle, crackle. Red electric currents sparked at the tips of Cal's fingers. The fire of destruction. Fire was weaker than water. No matter how strong a fire was, it would still extinguish once it went up against enough water. But something happens after that. The water turns into vapor. The chain snake opened up its mouth and revealed the hidden tip of the water spear toward Cal. The spear tip was shaking because it was trying to avoid this confrontation if possible. Rumble, the sky stopped roaring. At the same time, a red thunderbolt shot down from the sky. The stone spears and the chain snake slammed into each other at that moment. Boom! An extremely loud explosion filled the area. Ugh! Cal curled up. The silver shield and its wings surrounded him, however, it could not block all of the aftershocks of the explosion. Cal felt as if everything around him was flipping over. He could not even open his eyes to look around himself. Bang! 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 He continued to hear the stone spears break down. Cal coughed up blood each time that happened. I'm at my limit. He really was out of strength. He could not do anything else. He only had a tiny amount of dominating water left, while the indestructible shield and the vitality of the heart were barely holding on as well. None of the ancient power owners were saying anything, but his instincts were telling him that they had reached their limits as well. That was why Cal curled up. He made it so that the shield could be as small as possible as he slowly breathed out. However, his senses were waiting for something to happen. Cal started to smile. He could hear it. This was what he was waiting for. Cal opened his eyes. He could see a rock turning into dust. He could also see white smoke. No, this was the water vapor. The fire had changed the water. The fire of destruction had gobbled up the chain snake that was destroyed by the stone spears. A screech came out of the lake. This disgusting screech filled the lake once the chains disappeared. However, Cal smiled at that screech as he stood back up. The screech was just the cries of a loser. He looked terrible as his body was completely drenched, however. Cal's eyes were looking at something shining for the first time in a while. It was at the location where the gray chains had become vapor and disappeared. Ah, it was the location that the cries of the chains filled the lake. The thing that the stone spear and the fiery thunderbolt did not destroy nor gobble up could be seen. The water spear. The spear made of water was slowly changing shape. The dirty gray color disappeared as it turned into a shockingly transparent and beautiful color. See it? It was the moment he heard what sounded like calming waves. He could hear a pure and energetic voice. I am. The lake started to rumble with the water spear at the center. The water was moving. The water that was glowing transparently approached the water spear. The body of the water spear continued to get bigger. It looked beautiful in the process. That beautiful spear had found its target. A woman's energetic voice could be heard in Cal's mind. I am the sky eating water. The ground rumbled one more time. At the same time, the spear started to fly toward its target, the sky. The spear that was swirling with water shot up toward the sky. Cal felt as if he was looking at a dragon ascending into the sky like he had read about in old stories. However, the spear suddenly stopped in the middle. The woman started to speak. Isn't my name cool? The sky eating water, Cal calmly and honestly replied. Compared to the scary giant cobblestone or the fire of destruction, so. It was actually a pretty cool name. Are you good at cussing? Cal started to frown. However, Cal answered honestly, quite good. He hadn't cussed any time lately, but he had never heard that he couldn't cuss. Do you fight a lot? Cal answered honestly once more. I don't think I do, but I seem to be fighting whenever I look around. It's quite terrible. Cal started to frown, but the woman was laughing. Sounds fucking fun. She really is not normal. She seemed to return to her original way of speaking. It was the moment that Cal brushed the side of his eyes with his shaking hands. Drip. Drip. It started to rain. Cal lifted his head up. It was only raining on top of him. The large spear that had been rising up into the sky had disappeared, while a short spear the size of an arrow appeared next to Cal. I will be your spear. Cal grabbed the spear. He heard a determined voice at that time. I will destroy all of your chains for you. I will make it so that you have a free life. Nothing will be able to tie you down. I will protect your freedom. Cal closed his eyes after seeing a bright light coming out of the spear. That light was absorbed by Cal's body. She did not leave any tattoos on his body like the other ancient powers. However, he could still feel the power spreading throughout his body. It was at that moment Cal heard a voice in his head. Human. Cal's eyes opened wide. He turned his head. He could hear a faint voice from the distance. That voice was getting closer. Our human, I am coming. He could hear Rayon's voice. Cal's body curled forward at that moment. Ugh! His body and his insides felt as if they were twisting. Black blood started to come out of Cal's mouth. Extreme pain filled Cal's body. This pain was so bad that it made it difficult for him to breathe. He had never felt such pain in his life. It was hard for him to even breathe. At that moment, he heard an imposing but sad voice. It was voice of the super rock. Your glass plate that was about to break is fusing back together. Your plate is getting much bigger, so this is actually a good thing. The glass plate that was about to break from the imbalance of power was fusing back together. Water, fire, wind, earth, and wood. All of these natural attributes were fusing together. His plate that was about to break was returning back into balance. However, Cal had heard clearly. Your glass plate is fusing back together. It meant that, even after fusing back together, his plate would still just a glass plate. Who cares if it gets bigger when it is still made of glass? The super rock's apologetic voice continued to speak as Cal frowned. You can't faint for this one. So just bear with it this one time, even if it hurts. Damn it, son of a bitch, Cal was swearing quite a bit as he coughed up more black blood. He could only silently swear as blood continued to pour out of him. Cal's body slowly started to tilt. 1. Part of Korean folk tale that an Imugi, lesser dragon, that manages to grasp a Sintamani will ascend to become a dragon. Chapter 257. Eat up 4. The last remaining stone spear fell away from Cal's body. Cal's blood fell into the transparent lake and dyed it red, and his body slowly fell toward the lake as his blood had just done. You're causing all sorts of troubles. However, Cal did not fall into the lake. The ancient dragon that had approached him at some point supported his body with one hand, catching Cal before he fell into the lake. Cal was already drenched from being in the water and covered in blood that falling into the lake would not have mattered. But that wasn't the problem. Iruhaben quickly laid Cal down on the grass next to the lake. Huff, huff. Cal was not able to breathe properly. He seemed to be trying very hard to take every breath. He was coughing up black blood and his limbs were shaking. His body was twisting as if he could not handle it. Iruhaben Nim. What is going on right now? Beacrox frowned after seeing Cal's condition. It was very different than the times when Cal would cough up blood every so often. The person who was calm even when he was hurt, coughing up blood, or fainting was currently in pain because he was unable to handle the pressure. Beacrox suddenly recalled his father, Ron's comment, "You're the only one I can rely on since I cannot go myself." He had followed without complaining because it had sounded serious. He then just sat back and watched as it seemed as if Cal was just going to gain another ancient power. However, he could clearly tell that something was different after seeing young Master Cal's pain-filled expression. "Can we just leave him like this?" Beacrox was speaking with a sharp tone. Iruhaben kneeled down next to Cal and responded back. "We have to leave him like this." "What do you mean?" Cal Henitus is currently fusing his plate back together. Iruhaben stopped for a moment before continuing on. "I didn't expect that to be this painful, though. We can't heal him in any way right now. Foreign powers cannot enter his body until this process is finished." The ancient dragon was getting a headache. He had never seen anything like this in his 1,000 years of life. "I didn't know that there would be such a strong clashing of powers." The natural attributes in Cal's body were violently clashing with each other. Iruhaben started to frown. It was hard for even him to watch Cal, who was in so much pain that he could not even open his eyes. Seeing the always calm and collected punk being in a situation like this was difficult. "Ugh." Cal coughed up another chunk of blood. Cal felt as if his insides were flipping over. It felt as if his entire body had turned into glass and someone was hitting at him with a small hammer. He felt like someone was stepping all over his body, and that everything inside was twisting around simply to cause him pain. Cal was getting extremely annoyed. Is this supposed to be some type of martial arts novel now? Am I going through a body purification? What kind of sudden and unexpected pain? Is this? It'd be one thing if my body would get stronger from this purification, but it's just turning my plate into a slightly bigger glass plate. What's the point of that? Of course, it was a good thing that he would not die, but Cal could not help but be annoyed. This goddamn birth of a hero? He had never experienced such physical pain in his life. It was a different pain than the pain he had felt as a kid and as an adult when he was beaten up by others. "You cannot sacrifice yourself." The super rock sounded sad. "I can't eat right now. Let's get stronger. Let's get stronger so that we can throw money away as well. Think about how happy we will be." The glutton and fiery thunderbolt chimed in as well. Cal got even more annoyed as he listened to the ancient powers mumble. However, he didn't have the strength to express his feelings. It felt as if someone had drop-kicked his stomach, forcing him to take a deep breath. Ugh, he could not help but tear up. It was too much physical pain. Some pain would be fine, but this was beyond what he had expected. Beacrox, who was watching, could not help but get anxious after seeing Cal tear up from the pain. How painful must it be for this person, our young master Cal Henitus, to tear up? He looked toward Iruhaben while trying his best to maintain his calm expression. It was because he felt as if he should do something to help. However, Beacrox stiffened up as a chill surrounded his whole body before he could finish calling the ancient dragon's name. It was the needle-like feeling he felt as soon as they arrived at this gray eye-like lake. No, it was different than that feeling, but it still made his entire body stiffen up. This sensation was not violent. In fact, it was calm and silent. At the same time, it was filled with a deadly chill. He felt as if he was standing alone during a dark night without the moon. It was the type of sensation that instilled fear in any living being that was in darkness. Beacrox took one, and then another, step back. He then lifted his head. He looked toward the source of this sensation. It was in his arms. Beacrox could see something leave his arms to float up into the air. Rayon Meru. The black dragon was floating higher into the sky while being surrounded by black mana. A feeling of a strong and unequaled ruler that he had never felt before was coming from this strong yet oddly cute 6-year-old dragon. He's about to wake up. Iruhaben's voice reached Beacrox's ear. The ancient dragon was looking at the floating young dragon and getting the chills. Seeing Rayon's plate break and mana flowing out of Rayon made him believe that Rayon had not unleashed his attribute. However, that was not it. This sensation must be related to Rayon's attribute. What could it be? What could this cold yet silent feeling be? The ancient dragon looked at the growing human and young dragon before doing what he needed to do. He created multiple shields. He then placed one each around the young dragon, Cal and Beacrox. This was an important moment right now. This was important for both Cal and Rayon. This was the moment that would determine their futures. The ancient dragon wanted them to be able to fully grasp their futures, so he activated his mana in order to prepare for any unexpected situations. Iruhaben then touched his arm that was full of goosebumps. Ooh, the air was vibrating while a cold yet silent power started to drown out the lake inside the barrier. The ancient dragon looked toward Rayon, who caused this sensation. At the same time, inside the dream. Rayon was inside the trial ground. Rayon's time was starting to pass by. He could hear everything and smell everything. He could feel it as well. Rayon could feel it even though he couldn't reach him. Cal's painful moans. The smell of Cal's blood. The faint but heavy breathing. Rayon could feel that Cal was going through a significant amount of pain right now. Rayon recalled what Cal had said before. "Human, will you save me again if I become that weak again and require you to save me? Of course, I would save you. I will always be by my human's side when he is sick and weak." Rayon could feel the existences chasing after him in the dream. The large black dragon and the fake versions of the people he loved were chasing him. They continued to chase him, even when he kicked them off of his ankles and dodged them. However, Rayon did not pay any attention to them as he just continued to flap his small wings. Black mana suddenly started to approach the young dragon's wings. Rayon realized that he was able to use mana again. Then there was nothing for him to be scared about. He was very good at magic. That was something he could do well at any moment. The black mana started to gather in his wings. It then turned into a pair of large wings. These wings that were larger than even the wings of the 30-meter-long dragon appeared on the small dragon's back. They then started to flap energetically. Rayon charged toward the highest point of the trial ground that had neither a sun nor a moon. He then curled up his body. Rayon was heading toward the real world until he was 4 years old. That was how long he had to survive in that dark cave without a single source of light. He was moving beyond that past, from 4 years old to 6 years old. He had seen flowers blooming in the spring, snow falling in the winter, the beauty of the summer, and the sweet fragrance of the fall. He also thought about the people who were with him throughout those seasons. He could see the people that made those sceneries that could have easily been ignored into beautiful memories. Rayon could now see the highest spot in the trial ground. He then started to smile. He could see a wall. He could see the transparent wall. This place really was not real. This is not the world that I grew up in. Then there was only one thing left for him to do. Let's destroy that wall. I can get out of here by doing that. Rayon curled up his body as tightly as possible. He curled up, just as he had done whenever he was in pain inside that cave. He curled up, just as he had done whenever he laid down on the bed in order to sleep with Cal on and Hong. He curled up while thinking about all of his memories. The large wings curled up around him as well. Rayon Meru's body became like a sharp spear or arrowhead. That spear charged fiercely toward that transparent wall. "Human, I am coming." Rayon slammed into that wall. Crack. That small noise was just the beginning. He continued to push into the wall without stopping. Crack, crack. Cracks slowly started to appear on the transparent wall. Those cracks were appearing in the real world as well. Iruhaben commented as if he was gasping as he looked at Rayon. "His plate is being completely destroyed." One plate was breaking while another plate was continuously getting bigger. Iruhaben was worried that Rayon's aura would influence Cal, so he created a couple more layers of shields around Cal as he looked around. Neither of them could hear Iruhaben's voice right now. Rayon could not hear anything at all. His small head that was covered in mana slammed into the wall again. Crack, crack, the sound started to get louder. Rayon stopped for a moment and turned around. He could see that the large black dragon and the fake people had approached him. They started to grab at his ankles again. Rayon left them alone this time. It was hard to destroy this wall on his own. The young dragon was a child who had learned how to fight together with others. That was why Rayon chose to use a different method. The large dragon and the fake people surrounded Rayon, who stood still. Rayon's black mana covered them as well. They were fake people made with his future self and people he had built connections with in the past. The people grabbing onto his ankles were actually helpful to Rayon, who now had large mana wings. The arrow that only had an arrowhead now had a shaft. It was able to find its balance. Rayon stepped away from the wall. He then charged toward the wall again with everything he had. I am the great and mighty Rayon Miru. The arrowhead that had only been sharp was now reinforced by a sturdy shaft. That allowed the arrowhead, that allowed Rayon to slam into the wall even harder. That was the reason for it. Crack, crack. The small crack continued to be hit by strong impacts. Finally, boom, the wall crumbled. Rayon started to flap his wings past the broken wall. The dragon escaped the trial ground together with his future self and past relationships. Ah. Beacrox let out a gasp. The cold and silent sensation started to change. It felt warm. It was as if night was ending and the warm morning sun was shining down upon him. That warm sensation started to wrap Beacrox's tired body. Ha, the aura has changed. It is an attribute that can change. Iruhaben could not hold back his laughter. The aura that described the attribute had changed. An attribute that could change. What could it be? Anything that can change shows that it can grow. He must have earned something past the wall. The ancient dragon immediately realized Rayon's achievement. Iruhaben smiled and canceled all of his magic. The white gold shields around the lake turned into dust before they disappeared into the sky. The black mana that appeared through the white gold dust turned transparent and revealed Rayon's body. Rayon slowly descended amidst the shining white gold dust particles. He slowly descended like a flower petal falling to the ground. Tap. He then returned to his proper place. Oh! Beacrox tried to approach him in shock before stopping himself. Hoo. He could hear a child's relaxed breathing that was different than when he was sick. The young dragon seemed to be happily dreaming when someone caressed his head. It was Cal. Rayon had landed on the grass right next to Cal and stuck close to his side. It was how he fell asleep every night, including the night that his first growth phase started. That was the spot he returned to. Cal opened his eyes a crack in order to look at Rayon. It was still hard to breathe, however. He could not do anything when he heard the child's voice. Human, I am better now. It is your turn to get better. The things Rayon said to him before he fell asleep were still echoing in his mind. Cal's limbs were still shaking, and he was having trouble breathing. His mind was blank from the pain of his entire body breaking down. Tap. Cal's shaking hand landed on top of Rayon's head. The movement was very rough. The eyes that took so much effort to open were looking past Rayon and toward Iruhaben. He was looking at Iruhaben with desperation. He was shouting on the inside. Bed. Even if he was in pain, he would rather be in pain on top of a comfortable bed. He did not like being on this grass while being drenched. Cal was relieved after seeing Iruhaben nodding his head with a serious expression. He was thinking that his desperate plea had reached Iruhaben's ears. Iruhaben started to speak. Fine, you unlucky bastard. You probably don't want to leave Rayon like this. You should take care of yourself first, though. Although that was not his desire, Cal just closed his eyes. It wasn't as if Iruhaben was wrong. Both he and Rayon needed a bed. Snap. Cal felt his body start to float once Iruhaben snapped his finger. Iruhaben created a teleportation magic circle at the same time. The magic circle activated once Beacrox joined them above it. Pa-at. A white gold ray of light shot up into the sky, leaving nobody behind at the lake. A few hours later, rustle, in an empty area with a regular lake, footsteps could be heard as someone appeared by the lake. Why is it not here? The person staring at the regular water started to frown. He clicked his tongue as if he was disappointed. I need to quickly find the fifth one. The person observed the lake before leaving with a confused expression. At the same time, Cal felt a bit better after returning to the inn and laying down on a bed. These crazy ancient powers. This crazy glass body. It'll be so much better if I could just faint. He could not faint, and his mind was clear. Being in pain while his mind was clear was driving him crazy. His limbs were still shaking while his entire body was in pain because of his internal organs that were twisting. Cal hated this situation where he could not control himself. He had been so annoyed in the past when he, as Kim Rock-soo, was unable to control his brain's activities because of overload. This time, having his physical body like this was also annoying. Young Master Nim. He could hear Ron's voice. Cal slowly opened his eyes again. It was so that Ron could know that he was fine. However, just as he barely opened his eyes and looked toward Ron, he coughed up a chunk of black blood that dyed the bed red. Cal stopped trying to look at Ron and instead closed his eyes again in order to withstand the pain. Father. Beecrox sounded shocked. However, Cal had no way of knowing what was going on since his eyes were closed. He heard a different noise at that moment. Beep-beep, it was the sound of the video communication device. Hoo-oo, hoo-oo, hoo-oo. The noise of the video communication device was loud compared to Rayon's peaceful breathing. The ancient dragon Iruhaben, who was holding the video communication device, had a concerned expression on his face. It's from Rosalind. Oh, my head. Cal felt as if he was suddenly getting a headache. At that moment, Cal heard the reserved voice of the super rock that seemed to be wary of how Cal would react. You will need to be in pain for at least another day. This goddamn worthless body. Cal just wanted to faint. Chapter 258. Eat up 5. Beep beep, the noise of the alarm of the video communication device endlessly filled the room. However, nobody could show any reactions to it. Cal naturally could not do so even if he wanted to, so it was driving him crazy. Rosalind will only call for one of two reasons. She would have either been contacted by Crown Prince Alberu or checking in on Cal, who went to see Iruhaben with Rayon in his arms. Cal was thinking that it was more likely to be the latter. His short time away was for 3 days. It had only been 2 days so far. There was still 1 day and 20 hours or so to go. The Alberu that Cal knew would not tell Rosalind and the others who went to complete a mission about Cal's status this quickly. Beep beep. The video communication device continued to ring. She was not hanging up. I need to tell them to deal with her for now. Cal barely managed to open his eyes to tell his group to handle Rosalind's call. It took a bit of time for his eyes to focus. He then became anxious. Why is Beecrox supporting Ron? Beecrox was supporting his father, but that was not it. What is that dagger for? It was the dagger that Ron used when he killed his enemies. The old man was holding that dagger while glaring at Cal. Cal was truly afraid. On the other hand, Ron could see Cal's bloodshot eyes as well as the tears in the corners of his eyes from the pain. Ron could not help but feel intense anger as if the entire world was flipping over. The Eastern continent. It was like the night he lost his wife, family, and household. It was difficult for Ron to calm himself while seeing this red-haired person coughing up blood and being in pain, just like that red night when everything burned away. That was why he was clenching onto the item that he had on him since he was young in order to calm himself. The coldness of the dagger helped calm his boiling body. Click, click. Ron calmed himself as he touched the dagger. He then gently moved his son Beecrox's hand away from him. Honestly speaking, Beecrox was not actually supporting Ron and keeping him upright. Ron knew that Beecrox was actually holding him to stop him from doing something crazy. On the day he had lost everything in the past, he was unable to hold back his anger and tried to go get revenge on his enemies. If he had not seen the way his wife looked at their son as she closed her eyes for the last moment, if he had not seen how Beecrox looked back and forth between his wife and him, he would have gone to get revenge. However, Ron chose to run away rather than get revenge. B. Crocs was probably holding on to him, thinking that he would do something similar to that day. However, Ron was still able to stand it. All of this happened because of Arm. His old body was still full of fire. Click, click. Ron regained his rationality as he continued to touch the dagger. He slowly approached his puppy young master as he caressed his dagger. He was actually a tiger and not a puppy, but to Ron, he was still the trash young Master Nim and the puppy young Master Nim. He had no choice. Iruhaben told them that Cal would be like this until his plate finished fusing back together. Ron approached the bed and kneeled on one knee in order to make eye contact with Cal. Cal, whose expression still showed a significant amount of pain, opened his mouth. What was he going to say? Ooh-oo-oo-oog. Unfortunately, the only thing coming out of Cal's mouth was a pain-filled moan. Ron felt terrible. It felt as if his heart was empty. Cal became more anxious after seeing Ron start to frown. What's going on? Why does he keep looking at me with a vicious expression while touching his dagger? Did I do something wrong? No, I don't think so. So, what is going on? Those were the questions he wanted to ask, however, seeing that the only word capable of coming out of his mouth was, ugh, he could only make one decision. Let's just do nothing. I'm sure things will work out. I can't worry about anything else when I'm in so much pain. Cal just resigned himself to his current situation. Did Ron read the resignation in his eyes? Cal felt a bit better after hearing Ron's response. Please do not worry, young Master Nim. Ron remembered what Cal had told him before he left. It's so hard. As usual, please. He put on his usual benign smile. I will take care of everything, just like my usual self, so please get some rest, young Master Nim. Cal felt better after hearing that. He was worried for a moment about what this old man might do, but as expected, he was on the right track. Dealing with Rosalind. He could relax if Ron took care of that. Ron would be his usual collected self and give a simple but accurate detail of what was going on. Furthermore, as superficial as this may be, as the eldest human in the group, he will be capable of consoling them as needed. Cal closed his barely open eyes in relief. That was the problem. Iruhaben Nim, please connect the call. All right. I'll do it since Cal seems to trust you and left things to you. Connect the call, here, when I'm bleeding and in pain. Here, really, Cal's mind was chaotic. However, the moment he tried to open his eyes again, cough. He coughed up another chunk of black blood. Furthermore, Mr. Ron, long-time Rosalind's energetic voice suddenly stopped. It wasn't that the video communication device was turned off. Ron could see Rosalind, the confused Choi Han, and Locke all freeze up as if the world had stopped. Of course, he could see that a palace had lost its roof behind them, but that wasn't important. Young Master Nim, I will head out for a bit. No, don't go out. Cal couldn't open his eyes, so he could not see why Rosalind suddenly stopped talking. That was why he would rather have Ron stay here and continue to talk. However, Cal could not say anything because of the pain. Click. He heard the door opening. Once Ron opened the door and went outside, he could see two kittens curled up in the distance. It feels like we shouldn't go in either, but Nuna, I still want to go in. Looks like we should just stay here. It seems like one of those moments. Hong was trying to convince On to go inside the room, however. On made Hong stay next to her without moving after seeing the expression on Ron's face, as well as the smell of blood that brushed past her nose. Ron patted On's head and closed the door. He then quietly stared at the closed door for a moment. Mr. Ron, just now, what did I just see? Excuse me. That was definitely young Master Cal. Hello, Mr. Ron, he could hear Rosalind's shaking voice. Ron held the video communication device in his hand as he headed to the farthest corner room on the second floor. Gee, Grandpa. He could hear Locke's scared voice as well. Ron did not respond to him as he entered that corner room. Click, click. Once the door closed and he was left alone, the person who had not said anything until now started to speak. What happened? It was Choi Han. Ron observed Choi Han through the video communication device. He recalled when this punk first followed the young Master Nim and came to the Henatu's household. His son and Choi Han had pointed their weapons at each other in the kitchen at that time. This punk was being respectful in front of Cal, however. Once Cal disappeared after telling them to show him the way around the estate, he acted like a total jackass. Lead the way. This punk, who had been so informal to someone much older than him, had gone with them in order to fight against Arm and the mermaids after Ron had lost his arm and was respectful to him these days. Choi Han and Ron made eye contact. Please tell me everything without leaving anything out. Shut up. Rosalind and Locke flinched. They had never seen this side of Ron before. Even if he was an assassin, he was always nice and gentle to them. However, Choi Han, Ron, and Beecrox were more used to this type of Ron. I don't want to. Please tell me. Rosalind and Locke looked back and forth between Ron's vicious expression and Choi Han, who had no issues talking back, before choosing to be quiet after seeing Ron starting to laugh. Ron started to speak at that moment. You're always so impatient. Choi Han had taken his sword out extremely quickly the day they met as well. Please tell me shut up. I will tell you what I feel like telling you. Choi Han stopped talking after seeing Ron's angry expression. He could tell that Ron was not angry at him. This sly and cold assassin, who was also an old man who cherished his relationships, did not get angry easily. Shut your trap and listen up. Choi Han chose to stay quiet and listen. Cal was right to leave this to Ron. Ron was the only one who dealt with Choi Han, a sword master and a strong individual, as relaxed as Cal did. No, Ron was the only one who could treat Choi Han however he wanted to do so. It is regarding the young Master Nim's ancient power. Ron returned to servant mode and calmly started to speak. Ah, Rosalind let out a gasp as if she already understood what was going on. She started to frown. What is going on? Why are you all standing around after destroying the palace? Did someone die? Why do you all look like that? The killer whale Archie, who suddenly appeared and brushed off the dust from the walls off his hands, shut up and walked to a corner after seeing 3 pairs of eyes glaring at him. Okay. I'll be quiet. Ron started to speak again once it became quiet. The group's expression became worse as Ron's story continued. Even the killer whale, Archie, was looking at the sky in order to prevent himself from tearing up as Ron calmly explained the situation. Cal did not know what Ron was saying as he started to relax. He was starting to get used to the pain. Cough, fuck this shit. He was not getting used to it at all. Cal just gave up and tried to relax his body. Get some rest. Beecrox, let's go. Do we not need to be by his side? Rayon is here. He is even better than me and can figure out Cal's condition. I understand. Everybody left the room and silence filled the void. Cal was sweating and breathing heavily because of the pain that felt as if his entire body was breaking apart before being put back together. It was at that moment. Human. Cal could hear Rayon's voice. He seemed to have woken up after everybody had left. Cal could feel Rayon's round front paw wiping blood off of Cal's mouth. Human, are you still in pain? The round head that was still the same after his first growth phase rubbed on Cal's side. I will tell you first, weak human. The young dragon scooched up to Cal's ear and quietly whispered, Do you know what my attribute is? Rayon wanted to tell Cal first before he told anybody else. He wanted to tell Cal what he had achieved. Rayon whispered to Cal, the present. That was what Rayon realized. My attribute is the present. In addition to natural attributes, dragons could also have unique or abstract attributes. Rayon's attribute was abstract, but something that could be felt very easily. Rayon curled up next to Cal. As Aruhaben had said, there was nothing he could do right now. That was painful and frustrating, but Rayon just laid down next to Cal in his spot and continued to speak. Right here and now is my attribute. He was able to return to the real world and be present right here. That was the most important thing to Rayon, so that became Rayon's attribute. Tap. Rayon rubbed his head at the shaking hand that was trying to caress his head. It really was best to be alive right now. He was happy that he, as well as everyone else, were alive. Rayon stuck right next to Cal so that Cal felt the child's body heat as he continued his time in pain. The next day, click, the door opened. Beecrox entered the bedroom with a wet washcloth in his father's place. He then became anxious. Tap, the washcloth in his hand fell to the ground. Be Crocs? Young Master Nim. Cal was up. However, something was weird. B. Crocs became shocked while watching Cal barely getting up toward him before he rushed over to support Cal. Cal's shaking fingers grabbed onto B. Crocs's sleeves. Young Master Nim, what happened? Should I call Audiobook Nim? B. Crocs. Cal's voice was weak and shaky. B. Crocs's face slowly turned pale while listening to Cal's weak voice and looking at the chilly expression on his face. It was at that moment. He. It was someone laughing. B. Crocs turned his head after hearing the laughter. Rayon was snickering and rubbing his head on Cal's side. He heard Cal's voice at that moment. It was as weak as a transparent glass marble. Meat. Excuse me? Beef, pork, chicken. B. Crocs's expression slowly changed. Cal tightly grabbed onto B. Crocs's sleeves and asked with a desperate gaze, I'm hungry. B. Crocs calmly asked, Are you not hurting? Yes, I'm hungry. You really seem to be okay. Cal was not hurting at all. He could feel that his body was better than before, however, he was still hungry. Your plate is fused together again now. You did well. Let's not put yourself through pain like this again. It was the voice of the Super Rock. It's me, the fiery Thunderbolt. Time to go throw some money away now. The fiery Thunderbolt was cheering. Cal completely ignored the two of them. Instead, he grabbed his stomach that was extremely hungry. Rayon seemed concerned as he took an apple pie out of his spatial dimension before looking at its condition and pushing it to a corner before speaking to B. Crocs. I am hungry as well. Thanks for carrying me, B. Crocs. It's our youngest's voice. They're both better. I'm hungry too. On and Hong, who were roaming outside the bedroom door, rushed in after hearing Rayon and Cal's voice. The room started to become filled with energy as the children averaging 9 years old started to talk. Even the cold B. Crocs had a small smile on his face. It was at that moment. Ah, young Master Nim. B. Crocs remembered what he needed to say now that Cal was not in pain. It was the information that Ron had heard from Rosalind yesterday. It was urgent, however. He did not say anything until now because of Cal's condition. We received information that the Empire is preparing to take back Maple Castle that they lost to the Whipper Kingdom. Cal blinked his eyes. Who did what? The Empire is going to strike the Whipper Kingdom? Publicly, they are claiming that they will only take back Maple Castle. Isn't that the same thing? Cal's expression turned odd. The Magoru Empire is going to take on Tunka's Whipper Kingdom right now. Imperial Prince Adin and Tunka are going to fight. Is it finally time to strike the Empire from the back? Cal stopped the corners of his lips from twitching before blinking once more. Beefsteak. He needed to fill his belly first. He couldn't do anything with an empty stomach. Chapter 259. Eat up 6. The problem was that eating and living was so damn hard. Ha! A deep sigh came out of Cal's mouth. Delicious. The piece of steak he placed in his mouth was juicy and instantly melted on his tongue. It's so good after almost dying. I guess it really is better to eat after going through some struggles. Cal shared his sentiments out loud. Plop. Tang, pook. He then flinched at the noises he heard and turned his head. On, Hong, and Rayon. On dropped the piece of meat that was in her mouth. Hong dropped the dessert plate in his paws, and Rayon dropped the knife in his paw onto the table floor, and on top of a piece of meat in order. Rayon's pupils started to shake as he shouted out loud. Being alive is being great and mighty. I agree, you need to be alive to eat. Marianne said that death is the only time you cannot eat. You need to live in order to eat. Hong and On commented after Rayon. Cal nodded his head. Of course, you have to be alive to eat. You have to keep living. Of course. On wagged her tail at Cal's casual response before munching on the piece of meat again. Cal wiped the sauce off of the side of On's mouth, which was usually not needed as she was normally a meticulous eater. Hong and Rayon were getting a bunch of stuff on their faces as well. Cal had to keep wiping things off of the children's faces. The kittens would wag their tails and the dragon would flutter his wings every time he did that, but Cal didn't care about that. However, there was someone who was quite concerned about what he was seeing. The ancient dragon Iruhaben was sitting at the table as well. His gaze was stuck on Cal and Rayon without moving. Cal Henatus? Yes, sir. Cal took the cup of lemonade from Ron before answering. Iruhaben continued to speak. You will die if your plate breaks one more time. Cough. Cal almost choked. Goldie, why are you saying something that'll make me want to destroy the world? The chaotic eyes of the children, averaging 9 years old, turned back toward Cal. Even Beecrox, who was bringing in more food on a tray, and Ron, who was patting the coughing Cal's back, started to frown. The ancient dragon said what he needed to say. Cal, your plate grew way too big. That is why it will be impossible to recover if it breaks once more. So make sure to take good care of yourself. I plan on doing that even without you saying that, Iruhaben Nim. Cal caught his breath as he responded back. He really planned to do that from now. After being in pain once like that, he did not want to do that ever again. However, Iruhaben had an odd look on his face as he looked at Cal. His plate is now larger than Choi Han's plate. The size of this weak glass plate was larger than Choi Han's plate. Choi Han's plate had been the largest Iruhaben had ever seen on a human until now. That was why it was understandable that Choi Han had become a sword master. He was a human who could do even bigger things if he wanted to do so. However, Cal Henitus was not like that. He's not even average, he's a dunce. Cal was someone whose plate was not even average. Such a person's plate had become too large after the 5 attributes were properly gathered inside his body. However, Choi Han's plate is as sturdy as a rock while this punk's plate is weak. When it came to stability, it was the worst of the worst. Iruhaben turned his gaze again, the little kid. Rayon Meru probably realized that Cal's plate was bigger, however, he most likely did not know just how large it became. The little kid's attribute is the present. Although he was only 1m20 cm long, his insides were that of a full dragon. All that was left was for him to grow. They would be able to see the adult dragon form of Rayon once he went through his 3rd growth phase. The reason for this extremely fast first growth phase would be revealed at that moment. It would reveal whether he will be a king or maybe something else. Goldie, what are you looking at? You odd little kid. The present related to time. He had never heard about anyone with the time attribute. Iruhaben bluntly responded to Rayon, who was looking at him. You really are an odd and dumb little kid. No, Goldie Gramps, you're a little kid who doesn't even know how to use his attribute. It's fine not to know. You just have to learn. Rayon's confident response made Iruhaben sigh. Rayon would only be able to use Dragon's Breath after going through his 2nd growth phase. However, he should be able to use the lower-level powers now that he had completed his 1st growth phase. He'll be able to protect himself even when I'm gone. The ancient dragon, who only had about a year left, was slowly preparing for the future. Of course, there was someone who had a completely different thought than Iruhaben. Whether it is an ancient power or something else, we need to figure something out. Cal was thinking hard about how to start his Prolong the Ancient Dragon Iruhaben's Life project. However, he still had to take care of other things too. The Karo Kingdom contacted us? Yes, young Master Nim. The Magoru Empire was preparing to take back Maple Castle that they lost to the Whipper Kingdom. Rosalind had shared this information with Ron. However, following up the network of communication, it would be found that it started with the Karo Kingdom's crown prince, Valentino, informing the Roan Kingdom's crown prince, Alberu. He needed to figure out how the Karo Kingdom learned about that information. However, there was something else that shocked Cal the most. It was faster than I expected. Considering the Empire's face, it was natural that they would try to take back the lost Maple Castle. However, the war between the Northern Indomitable Alliance and the other kingdoms had not ended yet. But the Empire was preparing for war at such a time. Their goal is not Maple Castle, but the entire Whipper Kingdom. They would not have selected this moment if they just wanted to take back Maple Castle. Although publicly they were saying that it was for Maple Castle, their true desire was to swallow up the Whipper Kingdom. That was why they were using the current chaos in order to receive less attention from the other kingdoms as they aimed to expand their territory. The reason they were doing this was also probably because they felt a sense of danger. The other kingdoms were stronger than they expected. The Roan Kingdom, Breck Kingdom, and even the Karo Kingdom. They had all won against the indomitable alliance. Because of those results, the Magoru Empire's Imperial Prince Adin, who wanted to be the control tower of the continent, must have decided that something had to be done. And the prey in front of him was the Whipper Kingdom and Tunka. He made such a stupid decision. Don't you agree, Ron? That is correct. The Empire is making a bad move. The Whipper Kingdom. The Whipper Kingdom that despised mages was a loner in the eyes of the public. It was known that no kingdoms were willing to trade with the Whipper Kingdom right now. That was why the Empire must have been shocked during the former war against the Whipper Kingdom to see that the Whipper Kingdom had more rations and other supplies than expected. Of course, those were all secretly sent by other kingdoms. The Breck Kingdom and the Jungle had helped the most. The Empire, who did not know that, was probably assuming that the Whipper Kingdom must have used up a lot of resources during the last war and believes that they would be able to gobble up a weakened Whipper Kingdom with ease. The corners of Cal's lips were twitching. Rayon. What is it, human? Video communication device. Rayon snickered and took out the video communication device. Tada. Cal sighed and continued to speak to the 6-year-old, who seemed to be excited for some reason, such that he even took out the video communication device with such an energetic response. Connect me to the Super Rock Villa. Ron, Beecrox, and even Iruhaben flinched and looked toward Cal. Based on the flow of the conversation, shouldn't he be contacting Rosalind or Crown Prince Alberu? If not them, then maybe Tunka. But why the Super Rock Villa? Cal added on at that moment. We will contact the jungle after the Super Rock Villa. The jungle, Latana, the queen of the jungle. Why is he suddenly bringing her up? Cal started to smile as Ron frowned. The call was connected as he smiled, and Cal could see 3 people. Long time no see. I've been praying to the god of death every day to keep you all safe. Hey, young Master Nim, it has been a while. You are shining as brightly as ever, the crazy priestess Cage, the fake holy maiden and blood-crazed sword master Hannah, finally the half-saint Jack. The 3 of them all showed different reactions to Cal's smile. St. Jack smiled gently at Cal's bright smile, while the crazy priestess Cage started to frown. And finally, the sword master Hannah immediately started to speak. Are we finally going to destroy the Empire? Silence filled the room on Cal's side. Cal responded back through the silence. Yes. Everyone's gazes focused on Cal. Cal thought about everything involving the Empire until now. This pair of sun god twins, the cat knight Sir Rex and the alchemist from the slums. There were many other useful cards as well. It was just a matter of when to use each of these cards. However, it was now time. How? The sword master Hannah. He could hear her excited voice. Cal gently spoke in a benign manner as if he was a priest. I plan to write a new history from the bottom up. First up was the inside of the Empire. Jack Nim and Hannah, the fake holy maiden and the half-saint. The 2 of you will be the main characters for the history of the new Church of the Sun God. History is determined by a couple of strong individuals at times, however. It could also be changed by the numerous weaklings quietly waiting to strike from underneath the strong individual. The way that Cal chose this time was a method for the weak, by the weak. He looked toward the 3 people who would be the most important key players in this Empire destruction project as he continued to speak. You will soon meet him. There's a hero who will become the new ruler. The future ruler who was hiding quietly in the slums. Cal was going to turn him into a hero. Are you going to completely change the Empire? Cal responded to Hannah's question in a slightly jovial way. However, the words he chose to use were not jovial at all. We will prepare for a rebellion. Rebellion. A rebellion against the Church of the Sun God and the Empire. It was the moment that everybody's faces stiffened up. There was just one person who was smiling. The fake holy maiden asked Cal a question. Do you think that it is possible? It's possible. How is it possible? The eyes that were full of excitement were asking that question from the other side of the video communication device. Cal happily responded to that question. The Empire will soon be struck from multiple sides. The Whipper Kingdom from the east and the Caro Kingdom from the west. The Roan Kingdom and Breck Kingdom from the north and the Jungle from the south. I think Imperial Prince Adin won't be able to come to his senses. He'll be hit from every direction. That two-faced bastard will be beaten to the point that he can't feel anything. As an extra benefit, Arm will lose another one of their allied forces. The Sword Master Hannah licked her lips. Her voice was shaking at bit when the Empire is in a state of total chaos. Yes, at that moment. Cal spoke as if he was making a proclamation. We will eat them up. Cal looked toward the half-Saint Jack. He was standing there with a complicated expression on his face. Cal thought about the item in his pocket while looking at Jack's innocent-looking face. It was the divine item he had earned during his trip to the Empire. The condemnation of the sun. He thought about the divine item that was supposed to get rid of the night as he started to speak. The condemnation of the sun shall brighten the night. That is the name of the history we will create. The Empire will have a new story for the religious believers. Prepare to leave right away. Where are we going? You will first meet up with me. And then, where was Cal planning to go with this pair of twins and the crazy priestess? The Whipper Kingdom. They would head for the Whipper Kingdom. We will make a short stop there before stealthily entering the Empire. Cal said that to the trio in the Super Rock Villa before calling someone else and saying something similar. Miss Lena, the chance to get revenge on the Empire that was responsible for the Pillar of Fire in Section 1 of the jungle has arrived. Cal told Queen Latana to meet him at the same place. Please come to the Whipper Kingdom. He wiped his mouth after finishing his conversation with Latana before he addressed the people in the room. It's time for us to go back as well. The Western continent should be a chaotic mess right now. It was time to make it even worse. Chapter 260. Rip It 1. The Breck Kingdom's side of the Gorge of Death border, inside a quiet and dark tent. The only place with light was on top of the table at one side of the tent. Tap, tap, tap. The finger tapping on the table finally stopped. That finger then brushed the side of the persons whose eyes were bloodshot from fatigue. Roan Kingdom's Crown Prince, Alberu Crossman. He was not in the Roan Kingdom's palace, but currently was still unable to sleep inside the Breck Kingdom's Gorge of Death. Your Highness, did you know about young Master Cal's situation 1 hour ago? Rosalind was speaking coldly when he had received her call. However, she was not cold on the inside as well. Crown Prince Alberu knew that this was the case, thus that was why he was not angry. I knew about it, Miss Rosalind. I see. Rosalind did not ask a naive question like why he didn't tell her. She was smart enough to know what would make Alberu keep that to himself. Anybody could get sick during a war. However, it doesn't look like His Highness knows about everything. Is there more, Miss Rosalind? I shouldn't have asked. Alberu should not have asked Rosalind that question. Rosalind gave the response to Alberu's question. She shared what she had seen, as well as everything that Ron had told her. The greater good was important, but sacrificing oneself was not right. Alberu could not help but use coarse language because he had such thoughts. You crazy bastard. Are you talking about me? It was a familiar voice. Plop, the entrance flap was opened. It was late at night. Cal Henitus was standing outside the tent with a glib expression on his face. Why is this bastard here right now? Alberu could not hide his shock as he asked. Why did you come here? Cal was shocked at Crown Prince Alberu's blunt tone. Why am I here? I came to destroy the Empire. Smirk. Alberu stood up and picked up the bottle of wine his subordinate had brought him in order to let him sleep well. Alberu seemed experienced as he picked up the bottle of wine. He was able to pull out the cork with a casual pull. What is it? Are you not going to hide your strength? I do what I want. Our Roan Kingdom's future son truly is admirable. Cal smiled in a cheesy manner before casually sitting down on the couch. He then picked up the wine glass. I have returned. I knew I didn't like this guy. Alberu frowned and sat down on the other side of the couch. You damn bastard. The wine glass was filled with wine. Hey, bastard, you're the only noble who would get a glass poured by the Crown Prince. It is an honor, our Roan Kingdom's son. Just how much oil did you put on your tongue? Cal had a look of disbelief. Not as much as you, Your Highness. The Crown Prince also put on a similar expression. It was at that moment. There was a fruit basket that was brought with the wine, plop, plop. Some of the fruit in the basket floated up and then disappeared after making small noises. Crunch, crunch. He could hear someone eating the fruit in the air. Alberu turned away from Cal and looked toward the sound of the crunching. He then started to speak. "It is an honor to meet you, Dragon Nim." Rayon removed the magic. A 6-year-old dragon with a fruit in his front paw and fruit juice around his mouth waved one paw. "Nice to meet you, Crown Prince. I am the great and mighty Rayon Meru." "Yes, sir, yes, sir. You are great and mighty." Cal flinched. Forget being a quarter dark elf. Cal couldn't believe how glib Alberu was while greeting a dragon. "Little Crown Prince, you're not shocked?" Rayon seemed to be shocked as well as he asked Alberu the question. However, Alberu just smiled as he pointed at Cal. "This punk is more shocking." Cal started to frown after seeing Alberu pointing at him. On the other hand, Rayon nodded his head. "This is why you are the Crown Prince. You are a bit smart." "Thank you for the exaggerated compliment, great and mighty Rayon Meru Dragon Nim. No, you really are smart. Thank you very much. You seem to have been drawn together with all of the knowledge of the night." Rayon's mouth was twitching, and his wings were fluttering at Alberu's compliment. Cal made eye contact with Alberu at that moment. "Is this good enough?" That was what Alberu's gaze seemed to be saying. "He's got such a glib tongue as usual. He didn't even seem to have trouble praising a dragon." This made Cal feel like Alberu really was a person he could connect well with. Cal nodded his head with a stoic expression. He then reached his palm out. There was no need to say anything. Alberu took the top file on the table and handed it to Cal. Cal opened up the file as Alberu started to speak. Crown Prince Valentino seemed to be very hungry. Cal stopped for a moment before reading the first page as he thought about the Caro Kingdom's crown prince, Valentino. He was a humane crown prince and someone who was known as a close friend to the Magoru Empire's imperial prince, Adon. He recalled the meal they had together. "You can eat anything when you are hungry. You also become desperate. Commander Cal, I wish to speak in secret with Crown Prince Alberu." "Of course. He will fill your empty stomach, Your Highness." The Caro Kingdom and Crown Prince Valentino realized that they had been made fools after learning that the Indomitable Alliance and the Empire were in an alliance. He could not hide his anger regarding that issue. "Your Highness, how did the Caro Kingdom find out that the Empire was aiming for the Whipper Kingdom?" The Empire was thinking very lightly of the Caro Kingdom. Crown Prince Alberu took a sip of wine before continuing to speak. "Someone from the Caro Kingdom's side found their light affinity churches speaking with people from the Empire. The Caro Kingdom was grinding their teeth in anger at the churches who were no help, and instead wanted to run away during the Battle of Castle Leona. However, they did not bare their fangs in public. In fact, Crown Prince Valentino pretended to try to become close to them again for the recovery work after the battle, while stealthily keeping a watch on the churches. Thanks to that, the Caro Kingdom was able to find some churches making contact with the Empire. Cal thought about something after hearing this information. The only reason that the Empire would need to contact churches is to gather priests with healing abilities. Correct. These priests with healing abilities are the most important resources during a war. Cal understood why the Empire and the churches would do such a thing. He was certain that the Church of the Sun God, the largest of the light affinity churches, would definitely work with the Empire. Even if the Church of the Sun God did terrible things inside the Empire, there were still many believers within the Empire. The Caro Kingdom's Church of the Sun God's bishop probably wanted to take control of that area as well. That was the way for him to become the Pope. How angry must the Caro Kingdom have been after learning about all of this? These bastards were doing all sorts of things in their front yard. Cal understood why Crown Prince Valentino was so angry. However, Crown Prince Alberu had not finished speaking. Also, the Empire approached the Caro Kingdom to align together. That is the case? Ha! Cal was flabbergasted. Crown Prince Valentino must be grinding his teeth. Not only did they look down on the Caro Kingdom, they considered them to be idiots. The Magoru Empire had helped the Indomitable Alliance, even as they sent soldiers to help out the Caro Kingdom. Such a place was aiming for the core of the churches by recruiting the priests with healing abilities and asking the Caro Kingdom to make an alliance. The Magoru Empire supposedly said that they wished to use this chaos in order to increase their power along with their close friends, the Kero Kingdom. They wanted to do this together. Wow, Cal shared his honest sentiments. Total trash. Well, war and politics are always like that. I guess that is true. Crown Prince found it a bit odd while watching Cal nod his head with a look of disbelief. It was because Cal seemed a bit innocent as he was getting shocked and angry at something like this. I guess he is only 20 years old after all. It was the moment he had that thought. He could see Cal start to smile. Please tell the Kero Kingdom to align themselves with the Empire. Crown Prince Alberu looked toward Cal. The Empire probably wants to be like the Perun Kingdom in the Indomitable Alliance, however. Shouldn't we make it so that the Kero Kingdom plays the role of the Perun Kingdom instead? The Perun Kingdom had betrayed the Indomitable Alliance. The Empire would also end up betraying the Kero Kingdom. However, they will make it so that the Kero Kingdom betrays them instead. I guess I thought wrong. Did you have a different plan? No. I was stupid for thinking you were innocent. The corners of Crown Prince Alberu's lips started to go up like Cal's lips. He had the same thought. I already told them to do that. As expected, Cal started to clap. Rayon stopped eating fruit and clapped as well. Crown Prince Valentino has accepted that suggestion. Oh, Your Highness, as expected, our Roan Kingdom's son always does great things. Alberu did not look happy at all at the human and dragons clapping. It felt as if they were clapping for him to work even harder. That was why he raised his hand in order to make them stop clapping before continuing to speak. Enough sucking, you. Let's decrease the Empire's territory. Crown Prince Alberu made eye contact with Cal. Wasn't that your plan, Your Highness? Cal knew about Alberu's abilities based on how he had stolen the mages that were hiding away from the Whipper Kingdom during their civil war. It was difficult for the Indomitable Alliance to try to take territory away from the Roan Kingdom because of the Forest of Darkness and the Gorge of Death. However, the Empire did not have such obstacles. Crown Prince Alberu knew that Cal had the Cat Knight Sir Rex, the Alchemist, and the Sun God twins. Would someone like he miss this opportunity? He was probably aiming for it. Even if he cared for the greater good and peace, he was born with the blood of a ruler. Then it is better for me, who has all of these weapons lined up, to say it first. It was beneficial for Cal if the Roan Kingdom got stronger. That would decrease the number of things he and his people have to worry about in the future. Ending a war quickly and bringing peace back to the kingdom was good for the suffering people of the Western continent as well. Cal wanted to do it big if he had to do things anyway, with the hope that his late 20s could be the start of his slacker life. He still had not given up on that slacker life. Cal reaffirmed his goal before taking a sip of wine. Alberu rubbed his chin as he casually added on, I think I'll get a stomachache if I eat up all of it. He'll get a stomachache if he ate up the entirety of the Empire. He would also have to be cautious about the other kingdoms in the alliance. Furthermore, he couldn't just increase the strength of the allied kingdoms on a whim. What Crown Prince Alberu truly wanted was peace. Exactly. Just enough not to get a stomachache. He was only planning on taking a bit of the Empire. If it goes according to your plan, there will be a new ruler in the Empire. The current royal family would be no more. That was the only way to change the roots and get rid of the seeds of war on the continent. Alberu was moving for that peace, however. There was something he wanted in secret. Of course, it was something that he was pretty certain Cal would know about. Young Master Cal, we don't know whether that new ruler will become a king or an emperor. Yes, sir. We also don't know if the Magoru Empire will remain an empire or become a kingdom instead. We don't know what the Roan Kingdom will end up becoming either. Alberu lifted his wine glass toward Cal, who clanked his glass against it. Clang. Cal and Alberu's new plan for the Roan Kingdom started with the clear sound of glass clinking. Cal took a large gulp of wine to celebrate that. Clack, the empty wine glass was placed back onto the table. The Crown Prince could see Cal starting to get up. You still have things to do? Yes, sir. Go. Cal quietly left the tent after seeing Alberu shooing him away with no regrets. Rayon turned invisible and followed behind him. Cal was heading for his tent. Iruhaben should be there right now. There was somewhere for him to go with the ancient dragon that was waiting for him. Crackle inside a man-made underground cave. A torch was lighting the dark cave. Cal was guided by Watira as he walked through the cave. He is in the innermost cell of this underground cave. Watira was guiding them while looking around. The ancient dragon, Iruhaben, Rayon, and finally Cal. The three of them were walking through the underground cave made by the Breck Kingdom's forces. The three of them were silent. However, they were calm. Watira did not think much about it. Instead, she stepped back once they arrived at the cell at the end of the cave. He is in here. Clang. Watira could see the magic lock easily being broken. It did not take much for Rayon to break the lock with his black mana. He's grown. Watira could feel Rayon's growth while choosing to be silent. There was someone who walked past her and entered the cell. Cal was the first to enter. He could see someone laying on the ground like a corpse with his body slightly shaking. Both his eyes and mouth were covered, and he was also tied down. It was the dragon half-blood who was covered in scales and looked neither human nor dragon. Cal sat down next to the dragon half-blood. Rayon was standing right next to him. He could feel Rayon being wary, however. Cal did not say anything before taking off the device that was covering the dragon half-blood's eyes and mouth. 1 week. Cal had given the dragon half-blood a week to decide whether he would die now or live for 6 more months. Cal had come to find the dragon half-blood before that week was up. The dragon half-blood's black eyes focused on Cal. It was at that moment. "You are human." The voice came from outside the cell. It was the person who had not entered the cell. The ancient dragon, Iruhaben's voice reached Cal's ear. Iruhaben's voice had a mix of anger and lamentation. "You ate a dragon's heart." The dragon half-blood could hear Iruhaben's voice, however. He could not help but continue to stare at Cal. There was no sympathy nor anger in those eyes. An emotionless gaze and expression were directed at the dragon half-blood. The cold reddish-brown eyes asked the dragon half-blood a question. "Who are you?" The dragon half-blood, who had been spending his time in pain, couldn't talk properly at first because his mouth was dry. However, the corners of the dragon half-blood's mouth slowly started to twist upward. "Have you heard of the word chimera?" It was a creature made up of parts of multiple other creatures. For example, a creature with a lion's head and a horse's legs. It was a term used for a mutant creature, chimera. The dragon half-blood looked at the fully human and the 2 fully dragons as he continued to speak. "I am a man-made monster.